The Cross clan shall prevail. Chapter 43, 10 Murderous Intentions. An immense amount of people watched the final moments of the Ace-Mech duel. Many of them knew what was at stake. If one or the other Ace-Mech remained operational at the end of the fight, then they could instantly dominate the rest of the ongoing battle taking place below with just a fraction of their remaining power. It was not unusual to see a pair of closely matched Ace-Mechs to end their duels in a draw. If a lot of interests were at stake, and if the survival of the Ace-Mech was deemed essential to a state or organization, then there may be times where the ace pilot voluntarily withdrew from the battle before the worst had happened. This did not happen today. Patriarch Reginald Cross had stepped onto the battlefield with the determination to stake everything on this fight. There was only victory or death in his mind. His loss would likely doom the Cross clan and Operation Saturday market, as long as the Neo Amadeus was left standing at the end. Running away was useless. The Golden Skull Alliance and Task Force Fury had traveled deep into the interior of the Friday colonies. The only way the invading forces could deter other parties from dispatching their troops to intercept the fleeing Golden Skullers and Hexers was to ensure it retained the protection of an operational Ace-Mech. Even if the different coalition partners had stationed their own ace pilots and Ace-Mechs in their key colonies, the benefits did not outweigh the costs. Too much could go wrong to a colony that had lost its most important guardian. This was why Patriarch Reginald put his all into this Mech duel, that he had played a large part in enabling. After risking so much and putting his entire life and future on the line by engaging the Neo Amadeus in a risky duel, he had finally gotten the better of his opponent. The Mars had struck a decisive blow on the Neo Amadeus. Though the heavy saber did not cut that deep into the internals of the Ace Swordsman Mech, it nonetheless managed to damage or reduce the performance of a lot of important components. As the Mars completed its powerful cutting swing, the Neo Amadeus did not sit still, however. "I'm not out of the fight yet," Saint Jeremiah claimed, as the prospect of a loss caused him to strain his strength and the power of his Ace-Mech even further. Though their conditions were at their lowest points yet, Jeremiah's proximity to the boundary between life and death activated even greater potential than before. His resonance strength explosively grew, as Jeremiah relied almost completely on his willpower to strengthen and support the functioning of his damaged and failing Ace Swordsman Mech. Technology had limits, but life possessed no boundaries. Jeremiah's overwhelming urge to live and protect his people forced him to put up at least one final act of resistance. The Neo Amadeus somehow managed to conjure up 2 more phantom arms with the help of this inexplicable outburst. The limbs quickly unsheathed 2 more daggers and attempted to stab them forward in a final attempt to cripple the Mars. Destiny stands on the side of the Gage dynasty. However, just as the phantom limbs were about to complete this action, the Mars immediately offered a response. Patriarch Reginald forced 2 of the integrated energy weapon modules of the Arceus system to fire at the phantom limbs. Though the weapons weren't supposed to fire so quickly after unleashing a fairly powerful burst, Reginald decisively exceeded their safety limitations and forced them to squeeze out a weaker, but still fairly powerful laser beams. Reginald attached enough true resonance to the pair of beams that they instantly managed to destabilize and dispel the opposing Mech's phantom arms. 2 more daggers flung lifelessly into the void, as the Neo Amadeus lost its last chance of launching a counterattack. Jeremiah's final hope of snatching victory from the jaws of defeat had come to nothing. This time, the ace pilot truly had nothing left to give. His mind and will had run ground to the point where the Neo Amadeus no longer projected any form of domain field. The Ace Mech itself also lost so much power due to its intensive exertions and successive battle damage that it could not even muster enough strength to kick at the Mars. Saint Jeremiah quickly ran through all of his remaining options and found that he could not escape the prospect of defeat. The only choice he had left was to decide how he wanted to greet this loss. "It's over," he sighed in his heart that had grown heavy due to falling short of everyone's expectations. Saint Jeremiah understood that there was no point in staying any further. He clearly recognized his value as an ace pilot of the Gage dynasty. He was a strategic asset to his people and could still offer them protection once again as long as he managed to survive this battle and recover from his loss. He decisively activated the eject command, which quickly caused the back of his Neo Amadeus to blast open and allow its cockpit to launch into the distance. This action did not escape Patriarch Reginald at all. He already predicted that Jeremiah would eject as soon as he sensed a profound change in his opponent's aura. A part of him was willing to let Saint Jeremiah Gage be. The two of them had fought a glorious and honorable Mech duel where both of them relied upon nothing but the strength they had at their disposal to decide the victor. Though Reginald thought that his opponent was a bit too annoying and sanctimonious when he opened his mouth, Saint Jeremiah was nevertheless exactly the kind of ace pilot that the Cross Patriarch wanted to challenge. Reginald harvested an unimaginable amount of gains from this Mech duel. He accrued a lot of high-level battle experience and stimulated the growth of his resonant strength by putting his life on the line. He had also attained an unprecedentedly great amount of control over the Mars after truly taking possession of his ace Mech. The fact that he spontaneously completed the first phase of the Mech body merger process was an unexpected bonus as far as he was concerned. All of these gains and more put Patriarch Reginald in a rather generous mood. To him, it did not particularly matter whether his opponent managed to live or die after this fight. His Cross clan was not in danger of getting wiped out by the Neo Amadeus anymore, and that was enough for Reginald. There wasn't much reason for him to possess a lot of killing intent towards his worthy adversary. Yet moments before the Neo Amadeus ejected its cockpit, he received identical pleas from two different people at once. "Show no mercy towards your enemy," Master Benedict Cortez urged him. "Avenge the crossers that have perished at the hands of the Gaugers. Kill their saint and show the entire new frontier that our clan should never be provoked. Oh, and make sure you don't burn his entire body into ashes. I need you to bring back his skull intact." Vess was a lot more desperate to see Saint Jeremiah fall. "Kill, kill, kill. Don't let Jeremiah get away alive. He will always have a chance to take revenge against us as long as he is alive. The Gage dynasty already gained a new ace pilot, so if Jeremiah successfully manages to escape, we will constantly have to watch our backs." Vess absolutely did not want Patriarch Reginald to miss this golden opportunity. Once Jeremiah got away far enough, it was no longer proper to kill an ace pilot according to the rules and guidelines of the Mech Trade Association. This meant that even if the Golden Scullers or the Hexers managed to capture Saint Jeremiah, there was no valid reason to kill this powerful asset. The rules governing the treatment of captive ace pilots were so convoluted and unfavorable that Vess didn't want to bother with all of those complications. It was better to finish the job while there was still a tiny window of opportunity. Though there were definitely consequences to killing an ace pilot, Vess had many reasons for him to support this course of action. Aside from wanting to harvest the spirituality of Saint Jeremiah Gage, Vess also looked forward to earning another potent reward. What nobody knew aside from himself was that he had secretly activated the Mech designer system and entered its idyllic mountaintop environment a day before the crucial battle. Given all of the fighting that would presumably take place in front of the Cossack ring, Vess thought that the impending battle would grant him an easy opportunity to complete a few system missions. It turned out that the mission hall had cycled its offers since his last visit to the system space. Though most of the missions turned out to be random requests that weren't easy to fulfill, one of the more lucrative ones just happened to be incredibly relevant to current circumstances. Mission, Saintfall. Difficulty, A rank. Prerequisites, must have participated in the design of the Challenger Mech. Description. Few Mech designers are able to earn credit for the demise of an ace pilot in a Mech battle. Accomplishing this feat indirectly proves the strength of the Mech designer that has contributed to the design of winning Mech. Have at least one of the Mechs that you have worked on defeat an enemy ace Mech and kill its ace pilot in a valid battle. Reward: 1,000 Ascension Points. Time limit: 2 standard years. Penalty for failure: lower your spirituality by 4. Normally, Vess wouldn't have dreamt of accepting this mission. Defeating an ace Mech on the battlefield was already a heavy demand. Killing the ace pilot was even harder due to the limited amount of scenarios where this could be done. None of the ace Mechs in the Red Ocean were weak, and luring them out was impossible unless the Golden Skull Alliance was willing to do battle against a large and powerful Mech force. Even if the Battle of Pima Prime just happened to draw out St. Jeremiah Gage, it was far from certain whether Patriarch Reginald would fulfill the requirements of the system mission. Vess already lost one opportunity to complete the Saintfall mission early when St. Rebecca Andis managed to retreat from the battlefield under heavy escort. This time, he was determined not to miss this chance a second time. Venerable Stark, get ready. Eye of Ilvain, get ready. Battle Criers, get ready. If Patriarch Reginald wasn't willing to finish the job, then Vess wanted to make sure that his own clan would be in a position to complete his system mission one way or another. He would get into deep trouble if his mission was still running once the current battle came to an end. As the various available Larkinson Mechs began to lock onto the Neo Amadeus and anything that it might possibly eject, the Mars had already started to take action. Though Patriarch Reginald did not really listen to Vess, he was still willing to do a favor for Master Benedict Cortez. Besides, the man indeed made a couple of good arguments. A lot less people would be willing to mess with the Cross clan now that it had completely recovered from its past disgraces and claimed the life of a saint. Therefore, before the cockpit of the Neo Amadeus was able to get completely loose, the Mars had already swung around and impaled the center of the cockpit with the broken whale-cutting saber. Though the cockpit of the Neo Amadeus was reinforced with alloys that were just as tough as the exterior of the very same ace Mech, all of this was futile, as Patriarch Reginald empowered his weapon with enough of his powerful true resonance to punch through inadequate armor. Blood spilled from within the cockpit, as the body of one of the heroes of the Gage dynasty was crushed to pieces by the oversized blade. Nulo. This cannot be. Murderer. Hex fiend. Honorless dog. The reactions from the soldiers of the Sundered Phalanx, as well as the citizens of the Gage dynasty, conveyed an incredible amount of fury and dismay. In fact, many other Friday men who hailed from the other coalition partners also exhibited similar reactions. The loss of the Neo Amadeus was a great shame, but not a completely unacceptable defeat. The loss of St. Jeremiah Gage, a relatively young ace pilot who still had a bright future ahead of him, was much more devastating. Ace pilots were pretty much one of the few weapons of mass destruction that states and private organizations were allowed to employ on the battlefield. Each of them formed a massive deterrent and elevated the comprehensive strength and prestige of their respective states. Ace pilots lived for a long amount of time. While it was extremely troublesome to prolong the lives of expert pilots, it was a different case for those that had successfully experienced their second apotheoses. As ace pilots came closer to turning themselves into energy-based life forms, their bodies became a lot more malleable to their power. Even if they knew nothing about biology, just baptizing their biological human bodies with their willpower for many years was enough to transform their mortal coils in order to extend their lifespans. In fact, expert pilots were capable of doing this as well, but their resonance strengths were too low for them to make any major differences. Though the lifespans of ace pilots still varied wildly due to the differences in their domains and usage of their powers, it was not that difficult for them to live for up to 300 years without receiving any specialized treatments. Of course, Everything had limits, and it was extremely hard for ace pilots to push themselves past this point. Their only way to break their lifespan limitations was to advance to God pilot and attain immortality. Of course, no one in the Friday Coalition ever thought that their ace pilots had a chance of becoming a legendary God pilot that would earn recognition from the entirety of human society. It was already enough for Saint Jeremiah Gage to be able to serve the Gage dynasty, and by extension the Friday Coalition if he was able to pilot ace mechs for 2 whole centuries. Now, in a time where Jeremiah's promising career had been cut short after fighting his first true battle as an ace pilot, many Friday men mourned this devastating loss. What was worse was that the defeat of Saint Jeremiah and his Neo Amadeus immediately exposed the rest of the sundered phalanx and the intact parts of the Cossack ring to the power of the victor. Patriarch Reginald Cross did not experience any of the negative emotions of the people he hurt with his actions. Instead, he experienced ultimate bliss for winning this duel and starting his glorious career as an ace pilot on the strongest footing possible. Few ace pilots had the privilege of defeating an equal of theirs on the battlefield, let alone claiming their adversary's life as well. Decades or even a century could go by before an ace pilot would ever be able to fight a serious battle against one of their peers. This wasn't the case for Patriarch Reginald. This victory had greater meaning to him than anyone else in his position. His confidence in his strength and skill had boosted to an incredible height. No one would be able to question his battle worthiness anymore. He was no longer a dubious ace pilot who mainly relied on the unreasonable strength of his ace mech or the assistance of external helpers to defeat his enemies. It was all him. Reginald knew for certain that he fought and killed Saint Jeremiah by himself. No living mech and no design spirit had ever bailed him out like they did for the other mech pilots fighting on the main battlefield. Even now, he could feel an extremely close and intimate connection to his Mars. All of the previous instances where he piloted the Mars couldn't compare to how closely he was able to understand and control his ace mech. He intuitively understood that even if he was separated from his Mars, he could always call it back to his side as long as it wasn't completely broken. This was an exceedingly rare experience for ace pilots. Only those that had reached the end of their current phase would think about bonding themselves to their ace mechs to this degree, and it always took at least several years to complete the first phase of the mech-body merger process. Reginald actually suffered from a lack of information because he hadn't put much effort into studying the mech-body merger process. However, that did not stop him from enjoying and benefiting from the consequences of his actions. I have become the Mars. Strictly speaking, the Mars had become Reginald as well, but since he had gotten rid of its living personality, the phrase had little meaning anymore. What was important was that the Mars became a part of him in a way that made him feel as if he could actively mold his ace mech to make it more suitable for him to pilot. He had already done that to a large degree by baptizing it with his force of will. The Mars had improved in ways that Patriarch Reginald couldn't completely describe, but none of them were bad from his perspective. His desire to pilot a stronger, tougher, and more long-lasting mech had partially been realized due to the transformation that he had managed to spur on. It had played an important role in allowing Patriarch Reginald to win this crucial mech duel. In fact, his Mars was still changing even now. By defeating the Neo Amadeus in single combat, the Ace Hybrid Mech's God-body mechanism was harvesting a lot more spiritual feedback than before. The amount of people that actively watched the duel from remote and rooted for Patriarch Reginald and his Mars were too many to count. Though a significant portion of that same audience became dismayed when Jeremiah and his Neo Amadeus lost, more people sincerely admired the powerful Mars and celebrated its success on the battlefield. Though Reginald cared nothing about the senseless opinions of completely irrelevant strangers, the Mars was different. As a mech that Gloriana had designed to evolve into a god, the Mars craved the worship of the public. The more people admired the Mars, the more the Ace hybrid Mech was able to absorb spiritual feedback through its divine markers. Even though the vast majority of admirers were both weak and incredibly distant from the Mars, the sheer quantity of spiritual feedback produced by quadrillions of humans was vast. The Mars hungrily absorbed it all as if it was a sponge that could never have its fill. No matter what messy thought matter different people directed towards the crosser Ace Mech, its god body welcomed it all in order to fuel its long and uncertain ascension towards the third rung of the craftsmanship ladder. As the Mars clearly enjoyed the worship of other people, Patriarch Reginald spontaneously felt like making a show out of his impressive accomplishment. The Mech slowly rose and lifted up its whale-cutting saber that had run through the cockpit of the Neo Amadeus. The Mars had adopted a victory pose that was both provocative and domineering. "Murderer. Kill this brute. He's so strong. What a fantastic Ace Mech." Everyone had different ideas about the Mars, and Reginald's latest action directly stimulated many of them, allowing the Mars to harvest another spike of spiritual feedback. As much as Patriarch Reginald felt tempted to continue the show and posture even further, he still remembered that he was still a part of an ongoing battle. The defeat of St. Jeremiah Gage heavily impacted the sundered phalanx. Many of its Mech troops already weren't doing so well due to all of the setbacks and losses they incurred when fighting against their immediate opponents. The fact that the Mars was the last intact Ace Mech on the battlefield immediately caused the commanders of the sundered phalanx to assume the worst. Victory may no longer be possible. System Governor Mabrius Gage spoke as he lamented the loss of his nephew on the battlefield. "Speed up our evacuation plans. While there is still a chance we can secure victory today, if the Mars has enough strength left to intervene in the greater battle, then we must shift our goal towards mitigating our losses." Trying to win a battle and trying to minimize losses were two completely different objectives. The former could still give the Gage dynasty a chance to save Pima Prime, while the latter essentially gave their enemies free rein of the crucial port system. At this moment, everyone wanted to know how much fight the Mars had left. It was not certain whether Reginald and his Ace Mech were in a condition to exert themselves further. Vess, who secretly celebrated the completion of his system mission, quickly regained his composure when he recalled that the battle was not yet over. In fact, certain powerful ranged Mechs had already begun to shoot at the Mars. Normally, no ordinary Mechs dared to attack an Ace Mech, but everyone had seen how the Neo Amadeus inflicted serious damage to the crosser machine. For now, the Mars appeared to be able to resist the attacks launched by lots of ranged Mechs by relying on its thin, but still fairly potent Saint Kingdom. Even if the condition of Reginald's domain field was anything but good, his powerful resonance strength was still on another level compared to the resonance strengths of expert pilots. The Mars did not suffer any damage to its frame, even after suffering thousands of hits. The only attacks that succeeded in causing its thin and shaky domain field to wobble were the resonance-empowered attacks of Fridayman mid-tier and high-tier expert Mechs. In particular, the Star of Liberation posed the greatest threat to the Mars at the moment. The expert rifleman Mech packed a lot of punch, and its powerful expert pilot was able to impart her vengeful will to the full-powered positron and laser beams fired by her Slipstream rifle. Patriarch Reginald winced as Venerable Kazur, Riskin's utter hatred towards the killer of St. Jeremiah Gage had caused her resonance strength to explode a bit. She had become driven to destroy the Mars and make its pilot pay. "You annoying fly." While Reginald was contemplating whether he should start swatting down the Star of Liberation and other dangerous Mechs with the surviving armaments of his Mars, Master Benedict quickly uttered a warning. "Don't fight, Reginald. You've won the most important fight for us, but you paid too much to secure this victory. It will take a lot of effort for you to defeat the opposing expert Mechs, and the awful condition of your Mars means that your enemies have a small but real chance of exploiting its existing damage. What are you saying, Benedict? The ace pilot frowned. These guys think they can pick up a bargain now that my Mech isn't as good as before. I need to teach them a lesson and show them that I can still crush them regardless of the state of my machine. You can still do that, but I urgently request you to bring the Mars back to the Hemington Cross. I have called up an emergency crew of Mech designers and Mech technicians to resupply your Mars with fully charged energy cells and conduct emergency repairs onto its damaged frame. By my estimation, your Mars is around 12% battle effective in its current state and could drop at any time. We can lift that up to 30% after spending just 10 minutes with your machine. That should be more than enough combat strength for you to roll over the remaining elements of the sundered phalanx and break open the Cossack ring. Though Reginald really wanted to continue the fight right away, his concern for the Mars trumped his bloodlust. Very well, I will go back, but you better do your job quickly. I don't want to make everyone believe that Jeremiah Gage pushed me to my limits. I am not that weak. No problem. Everything is already in place. By the way, please do me another favor and bring back the cockpit as well as the wreck of the Neo Amadeus back to our flagship. None of the Friday men should be able to prevent you from claiming your rightful spoils. Reginald's eyes lit up. Claiming a trophy from the remains of his opponents was a time-honored tradition. Will do. I promise you shall be able to enjoy the remnants of strong Mech to your heart's content. The Mars used one of its hands to maintain hold of its saber, while using the other to grab onto the Neo Amadeus. Though his enemies intensified their attacks on the Mars, Reginald did not feel too bothered by the largely ineffectual hits. He was already wondering what he should take from the remains of the Neo Amadeus in order to make a trophy that commemorated his first victorious ace Mech duel. The fall of the Neo Amadeus plunged the sundered phalanx into despair. Many Gaugers already understood that they had lost the battle from the moment St. Jeremiah Gage met his demise at the hands of Patriarch Reginald Cross. The chances of being able to salvage a victory under these circumstances were not great. The Mars, though heavily damaged and partially crippled, was still a formidable asset on the battlefield. Perhaps it did not possess the strength to challenge another ace Mech in battle, but if the Friday men had stationed another one in Pima Prime, it would have showed up long before St. Jeremiah actually perished. Under the current circumstances, even if ace Mech stationed elsewhere in the Friday colonies had already been dispatched to Pima Prime, they would arrive too late to save the local garrison from getting defeated. From now on, we are no longer fighting to preserve our homes. Our new job is to buy time so that we can evacuate as many talents and critical industrial machinery. Pima Prime may be on the verge of falling, but Rote Suma and New Rams are still standing strong. Our Gage dynasty shall rise from this defeat and avenge the killing of our great and honorable saint. But our ability to do so will heavily depend on our ability to stall and disrupt the invading troops as much as possible. The only way to prevent the Hexers from claiming total victory is to ensure that we can make a comeback. We have managed to turn the tides against the Hexers before, and we can do it again. Our enemies will grow overconfident and complacent after their initial string victories once again. This will leave them open to a counterattack as long as we bide our time and recover what we have lost. Last time, it was the Carnages and the Vermeers who were suffering the brunt of Hexer aggression. This time, it is our turn to suffer the wrath of our archenemies. Let us show the other Friday men that we are just as capable of picking ourselves up after a defeat. Though the Mech pilots and support personnel of the sundered phalanx suffered a massive hit to their morale from the moment the Neo Amadeus fell, they were still professional soldiers who did not forget their duty. Under the urgent exhortation of their leaders, the Gauger Mech pilots did not collapse or fall apart, but bonded closer to each other as they focused on executing their mission. The colonial administration had already commenced emergency evacuations. A long train of starships, either civilian or military, had been emptied of all redundant cargo and other junk so that they could be stuffed with as much expensive and valuable assets as possible. The people on the ground hastily brought away whatever valuable goods they could pull out in a short amount of time, such as high-grade exotics, high-end processors, specialized lab equipment, modern superfabs, unique experimental specimens, and more. "We can't pull out this mass alloy compressor, Chief. It's too big and it's completely affixed to the foundation. We can't dislodge it by force or else we'll break too many internal components." "Scrap it then. Rig it up to blow or call down a Mech to tear it down. We are not leaving our stuff to the hexers." Already a lot of crews were proactively destroying whatever valuable assets that they couldn't take away. Millions of MTA credits worth of industrial infrastructure were getting blown up in a matter of hours, but the Gaugers simply didn't have enough personnel to demolish everything on the list. Even though it was clear that the hexers would probably leave Pima Prime after a short stay, the Gaugers truly did not want to give the hexers the satisfaction of looting a huge amount of valuable booty from Pima Prime V. "Why are we destroying everything that we have built? Won't we come back again once the hexers are done with the place? They can't possibly steal all of our stuff. They don't have enough cargo space to empty our entire planet. We are trying to make a point to our enemies. Our goal is to discourage the hexers from launching another massive attack on the Friday colonies. The less they are able to recoup their losses from looting our colonies, the less likely they will come back to plunder us again." The Gaugers in charge of this chaotic process made a lot of ruthless decisions that dismayed a lot of colonists that had committed to Pima Prime. One of the most heartless decisions of all was the instruction to reserve most of the available volume of their evacuation ships for cargo, instead of people. Though the Sundered Phalanx already tasked a small portion of the available ships for the evacuation of important leaders, high-ranking Mech designers, important researchers and engineers, surviving Mech pilots, other military servicemen, and so on. All of these vessels quickly filled up, especially once they took on the families of the aforementioned people. Paendia Novel System, Governor Mabrius Gage, had already written off millions of colonists who had moved to the Red Ocean in the promise of starting a new life. None of them possessed the skills, wealth, connections, or influence to make it worthwhile for the evacuation forces to reserve a seat on their outgoing ships. "We underestimated the threats in the Red Ocean," Mabrius Gage frankly admitted as he witnessed the unstoppable decline of the defending troops from the Palace of New Beginnings. "Our dynasty is strong in the Komodo Star sector. No one dares to threaten us in our native territory. It is different in Magyar. Here, we have only stationed a limited amount of forces. With most of our military assets a galaxy away, we have failed to deter the hexers into launching a massive raid. We must not make this mistake again." The Gage dynasty had learned many painful lessons today. The leaders back in the old galaxy were rethinking their entire strategy and approach towards the new frontier. Whether the Gaugers would choose to strengthen their commitment or pull back their investment in the Friday colonies was a discussion for another day. For now, doom and gloom descended over Pima Prime V. The highly developed colony that almost caught up to Davut Roman 7 in terms of prosperity and economic activity would no longer be able to remain as big and influential to the regional economy as before. This was such a crucial setback that Pima Prime's chance of becoming the main trading hub of this corner of the Magyar Middle Zone had dropped to zero. As the Gaugers tried everything they could to mitigate their losses, Task Force Fury and the Golden Skull Alliance still had a tough fight ahead of them. The defending Mech weren't showing any signs of flagging. In fact, it was the opposite. The Sundered Phalanx Mech units fought as if there was little holding them back anymore. With many of its combat carriers reserved for the evacuation of critical personnel and assets, the Sundered Phalanx was unable to bring away as many Mechs as before. This was why the Fridayman Mech pilots received the order to push their Mechs as hard as possible and eject once their machines finally reached their limits. "Don't be afraid of losing your Mech. Just make sure you take down at least one Hexer Mech with you and eject in time. We can still build another Mech for you in the future, but we need you alive and well to defend our remaining colonies in the future. This change of attitude caused the sundered Phalanx Mech divisions to stop their gradual retreat, as they no longer tried to make their Mechs last as long as possible. Instead, Mech divisions such as the heavily battered Medallion Guards and the barely recovered Nidden Vergers fearlessly threw whatever operational Mechs they had left to the advancing enemies. Damn it, these Friday men are fighting as if there is no tomorrow. Consolidate our lines and wait for reinforcements. Don't fall into their trap and exchange wounds with each other. It's not worth it to lose one of your Mechs for one of theirs. The sundered Phalanx did not have too many concerns about losing its Mechs because the Gaugers were in the middle of friendly territory. There were enough friendly forces in the region to provide them with safe harbor. This didn't apply to the attacking forces. As long as Task Force Fury and the Golden Skull Alliance lost too much strength, the other coalition partners would doubtlessly be tempted to avenge the fallen. This actually caused the attacking forces to slow down their progress and fight less ferociously. It was strange to see the Hexers and their allies holding back when they clearly held the advantage on the battlefield, but they too were becoming more concerned about minimizing their losses. Keep it slow and steady, men, a Larkinson Mech captain reminded his subordinates. We've already lost enough Mechs as it is. We won't be able to proceed with our Trailblazer expedition if we have nothing left to fight against the aliens of the new frontier. Just hold the line and let our artillery do the work. Many Larkinson Mech legions, such as the Avatars of Myth and the Flagrant Vandals, were unable to press the attack, despite the fact that they were most comfortable when they were on the offensive. Lainey Larkinson breathed deeply as her battered, but still operated Lucid Rage Mech had flown behind the Mech formations of the Avatars of Myth. After fending off an enemy expert candidate, her Mech not only depleted most of its energy cells, but also lost a tonfa. Lainey had little choice but to pull back to her mothership so that a maintenance crew could resupply her machine and quickly patch up the largest breaches in her armor. When her Lucid Rage deployed into space for a second time, Lainey looked forward to challenging other Fridayman champions and expert candidates, but it didn't appear that she would have much luck with that. There was much less room for independent action. Initially, Lainey thought that the remainder of the battle would play out as a slow grind. The furious enemy counterattack was unsustainable. The sundered Phalanx would run out of Mech sooner or later. All of that changed once thousands of Fridayman offensive Mechs gathered together and swung around the main lines in order to advance towards the invading fleet. The Gaugers have gone crazy. They're launching a suicide attack on our fleet. What is their target? Their offensive is aimed straight at the spirit of Bentheim. Their goal is clear. They want to decapitate our clan. What? Many Mech pilots, including Lainey, became shocked when they learned of the Gage dynasty's final attempt at resistance. The attack made sense in a way. Patriarch Vess Larkinson, the Mech designer responsible for empowering the Hex army with living Mechs, was closer to the Fridaymen than ever before. This was their best opportunity to assassinate an important figure to the Hexers and salvage at least one unambiguous victory out of this fiasco of a battle. Many Mech pilots of the sundered Phalanx willingly took part in this offensive, even though their chances of making it out alive was much smaller. Their duty compelled them to offer themselves up and do whatever it took to permanently weaken the Hex Federation. Champion Lainey, Commander Melker directly addressed her over a communication channel. I am dispatching you and your fellow champions back to our main fleet to protect our patriarch. Do whatever it takes to keep him alive. I'm on it, Commander, Lainey promptly replied as she regained her sense of urgency. Many more Mechs hailing from the Larkinson clan and their allies peeled away from the front lines so that they could do their part to prevent the Gage dynasty from getting the last laugh from this battle. Protect our patriarch. The last dance was about to commence. Before venerable Janzi Larkinson deployed into the field, she had a brief moment of time where she could enjoy the company of her little family. Many people in the clan had reacted with surprise when she initially became engaged with a clansman. Too many people saw her as an abrasive expert pilot who openly dared to defy the Larkinson patriarch and anyone who supported a reckless agenda. While Janzi was completely unapologetic about her advocacy, this was far from her only side. As a true-blood descendant of the Larkinson family was truly important to her. The imperative to start a family and produce children that could continue the legacy of the Larkinsons was seared in her very being. This was why she had taken valuable time away from her training to find a like-minded partner. Suffice to say, her initial dates did not exactly proceed smoothly. Though Janzi still attracted a lot of admirers due to the fact that she was an expert pilot, it was a lot harder to find a clansman that she considered sane. Too many boys professed their support for the policies and decisions of Patriarch Vess. There was no way that Janzi wanted to start up a relationship with a man who had no problem with dragging off the Larkinson clan into dangerous alien territory. She felt she was lucky when she finally met a match that was aligned with and supportive of her views. Janzi still recalled her first date with the man that eventually became her husband. Both of them dressed up for the occasion and met each other inside an upscale restaurant in the commercial district of Cotter City on Davute Roman 7. If I had a choice, I would have never joined the Larkinson clan. Its history, its military background, and its penchant for provoking violent conflicts with many different groups is completely the opposite from what I seek in an organization. Then why did you join our clan regardless of your personal feelings? Janzi curiously asked. Our family was in a lot of trouble back then. Adnau Pernus Larkinson helplessly smiled. We were targeted by our political enemies back in the Grand Loxic Republic during the height of the Crown Uprising. The mass unrest and frequent terrorist attacks has left us bereft with allies and support to keep us safe. Your expeditionary fleet specifically swung by our planet to rescue my fellow Pernusers, and I in exchange for offering our services to you Larkinsons. No matter what I think about your clan, I am not a man who goes back on my word, so I have diligently put my expertise to good use, even if I am not enthusiastic about my current employer. I can understand how you must feel when your circumstances left you with no alternatives. Janzi genuinely sympathized with the man. Do you hate our clan? Adnau shook his head. Oh no, your Larkinson clan still has many positive aspects. I could have ended up in much worse places. I merely object to giving too much weight to the military side of the clan and taking personal part in dangerous expeditions and campaigns. I understand that it may have been necessary for your people to take risks in the past, but the gains that you have made and the business empire that the Patriarch has built up are more than enough to sustain our prosperity and provide a good and stable life for every Larkinson. Is that what you truly think? Janzi asked as she genuinely looked impressed at what she heard. In fact, she didn't have to ask for confirmation. Her strong intuition was already able to sense the sincerity in Adnau Pernus's voice. The man confidently smiled. I should know, miss. I am an economist. I am currently working for the central bank of the Larkinson clan. While I am not allowed to mention any specific numbers, I have come in touch with so much data that shows how explosively our economy and financial position still grow in the coming decade that I see little reason in employing our Mech forces for anything but defense. That is exactly what I think as well, Mr. Pernus. Please call me Adnau. May I call you Janzi, Venerable Larkinson? The expert pilot gave him a brilliant smile. You may. I never liked the word venerable anyway. It makes me sound as if I have put myself above other clansmen such as yourself. You are better than other people. You expert pilots play an important role in securing our clan and serving as role models for the next generation of Larkinsons. There is no need for you to flatter me, Adnau. The two Larkinsons, one true blood and one adopted, managed to hit it off well as they continued their discussion over dinner. It was rare for Janzi to find a clansman who possessed genuine pacifist views. This was because the recruitment officers specifically screened every applicant for their compatibility of the overall direction of the Larkinson clan. Anyone who harbored opinions similar to that of Adenau Pernus were often kicked out of the recruitment offices before they were 10 minutes into their opening interviews. The instance where the Larkinson clan almost coerced the Pernus family into the fold was a rare case where people with radically different opinions ended up as Larkinsons. Adenau and many of his relatives still couldn't forget the time where Larkinson instructors had put them into hellish training in order to integrate the Pernusers into the Larkinson clan. In any case, as Janzi and Adenau continued to date each other over the course of several months, they eventually decided to tie the knot and form a permanent union with each other. Though venerable Janzi hardly considered Adenau to be the perfect man for her, he was at least mature and sensible enough to keep her pleased. She did not hold any high expectations for her spouse. No matter whether Adenau was a respectable economist or a failing artist, it was enough for him to stay by her side as long as he did not oppose her strong views. Adenau, on the other hand, was more than pleased with the woman he ended up with. Despite her notoriety among the Larkinsons, she was still a fairly powerful expert pilot who partnered with one of the most iconic and promising living Mechs of the Larkinson clan. "I won't lie to you, Janzi," the man told her lover fairly early on. "Our Pernus family strongly supports our relationship. I am hardly the only Pernuser that thinks our clan should chart a different course. Pulling someone as powerful as you into our family's orbit will strengthen our hand and give us more political leverage over time. We can get a lot more done if we unite our strength." Janzi smiled. "I have no problem with that. I already expected your people to hold such views. I am not opposed to allying with your Pernus family. Though we still have our differences, we also have a lot in common. I can't fight Vess and his sycophants alone. I don't have the political acumen and organization to effect meaningful change. I have concluded that the best way for me to save our clan and protect our clansmen is for me to work together with the more risk-averse members of your family. How many of them agree with our stances?" "Plenty," Adenau smirked. "Though our family only makes up a small part of our clan, don't forget that the majority of my relatives are positioned in the middle and upper layers of the clan administration. Our influence is disproportionate to our numbers, but the problem is that the patriarch is so strong that many of us do not dare to voice our actual opinions openly. The same goes for other clansmen whose risk appetites aren't as great. I believe that once an iconic Larkinson such as yourself joins our faction, we will be able to provide a voice for many aggrieved and uncertain clansmen." Though Janzi and the Pernus family hardly made any progress on this front, the expert pilot's personal life changed quickly after she married Adenau Pernus. Experiencing pregnancy and giving birth to her first baby son was one of the happiest and most memorable moments of her life. As a woman born into the Larkinson family, her aunts and uncles often emphasized how meaningful and important it was for her to prevent herself from losing herself in her duties as a soldier. It wasn't until she started to raise her lovely little boy that the meaning of the word family became a lot more personal and important to her very being. "Mommy." "Yes, Mercer." Venerable Janzi smiled as she held her boy in her arms. "Will you beat a lot of Mechs today?" "I will fight as many Mechs as I have to, but that doesn't mean it is good for you to look forward to defeating as many enemies as possible." "Huh. We are committing a grave injustice to the people of this star system by invading their territory and threatening to destroy their homes and livelihoods. I already feel guilty for taking part in this attack at all, but I have little choice in the matter. Why is Mommy sad? Mechs are so cool. I want to see Mommy fight." The expert pilot exchanged a helpless glance with her husband. No matter how much they tried to shape the views of their young child, it was all too easy for Mercer to inherit the love and enthusiasm for Mechs and battle from other Larkinsons. "Come back safely, okay," Adenau softly requested after he kissed his wife. "It is moments like these that I feel regret for not being able to fight myself." The expert pilot hugged her child and husband one last time. "There is no need for you to fight. That is my job. I will try my best to come back alive, but I can never make any promises. There are times where my duty obliges me to stand my ground and fulfill my responsibilities even at great risk to my life." "Why, Janzi? Why are you willing to go so far?" "Because I am a knight," she stated with utter conviction. "I am a protector of the weak and the guardian of the innocent. Though I do not agree with the decision to attack Pima Prime, I will still lend my strength to the clan, if only to shield our fellow clansmen from the consequences of provoking a fight against the Friday men." This was the life of a soldier, a Mech pilot and a knight. She didn't get to choose the direction of the Larkinson clan, but that did not stop her from fighting on its behalf. After she finally parted with her husband and child, Janzi lifted off from the deck and entered the cockpit of the Shield of Samur. She patiently waited until she received the order to activate her mech and sortie into space. "Once more into the breach, my old friend." The Shield of Samur's powerful presence embraced Janzi as if it was welcoming back a sister. "We have a tough fight ahead of us, Sammy," Janzi spoke in a familiar tone. "Our duty remains the same whether we fight against mechs, vorybugs, or phase whales. We are the shield that provides cover to those that cannot protect themselves." "I know. The enemy firepower will likely be great. The sundered phalanx will test our defenses more than the other enemies that we have confronted in the past. We are not alone. The amount of opposition may be great, but we have enough comrades by our side. Let US focus on our own performance. The greater our results, the more our clan respects our strength. IT will be easier for the both of US to realize our goals if we can use this opportunity to prove that we can do more than lift our shield and resist incoming attacks. That will depend on what the Friday men will do. We will be staying in the rear for the entire duration of the battle. To be honest, I hope the sundered phalanx will never be able to push close to our fleet. If the enemy mechs can get close enough to attack our ships, then something has gone seriously wrong for our clan." The Shield of Samur's 3 eyes flashed with anticipation. "That shall be the moment where we will truly be able to showcase our strength." The battle against the sundered phalanx initially proceeded according to Janzi's expectations. The massive, cumbersome battle lines of the Hex army and the sundered phalanx collided against each other. The mech units from both sides then proceeded to grind each other down like they had always done during the Komodo War. It was not as if brilliant commanders from both sides attempted to pull off clever plans that allowed them to catch their enemies off guard or outflank vulnerable enemy units. However, when the scale of mech battles had grown to such an enormous extent, everything pretty much turned into a numbers game. Even individual expert mechs weren't able to single-handedly affect the outcome of a massive mech battle anymore. The times where heroes such as Venerable Stark or Venerable Joshua could single-handedly collapse an entire enemy mech force were largely over now that the Larkinson clan took part in battles of this scale. Only ace pilots such as Patriarch Reginald Cross possessed enough overwhelming power to single-handedly determine victory or defeat amidst the collisions between hundreds of thousands of mechs. When Venerable Janzi witnessed the rapidly increasing scope of the battle unfolding before her eyes, she felt more insignificant than ever. "Don't get distracted, partner. The enemy ranged mechs are directing their firepower towards our ships. We must do our best to limit the damage." "Right." Janzi's initial participation in the battle was not that exciting, but that was nothing new to night mech pilots. They chose their specialization with the knowledge that they would have to perform some of the least desirable combat duties on the battlefield. No mech pilot liked to put his or her mech in the line of fire and allow their machine to get pummeled without being able to counterattack. A part of Janzi even wished that the design department added a pair of shoulder-mounted guns to the shield of Samur, so that she could keep herself busy during times like these. It was a pity that the clan neglected to do so during the latest upgrade round of the shield of Samur. The Mech designers who upgraded her expert Mech a few years ago largely preoccupied themselves with replacing the outdated internal parts and systems with modern, high-end Heartland-level alternatives. Many performance parameters shot up after this upgrade. Janzi was particularly happy with the massive improvements to the mobility of her battle partner. Aside from replacing the old and rather inadequate flight system with a heavy-duty model that produced much more thrust power at the cost of increased energy consumption, the Shield of Samur also gained the option of equipping its own minidrive. The Skidrock AF-2 heavy-duty combat drive was yet another miniature warp drive that Morton Tech developed for the Larkinson clan. Compared to the stiletto equipped by the Dark Zephyr provided by the same high-end equipment developer, the Skidrock drive was built like a tank. Larger and more powerful than any other combat drive developed for the Larkinson clan, the Skidrock drive possessed the power and the resilience to propel a heavy space knight across the battlefield and take a beating if necessary. Of course, the Skidrock drive also integrated a whopping 800 grams of face water in order to effectively enable warp travel for a machine as large and heavy as the Shield of Samur. Venerable Janzi did not expect her expert space knight to win a race against the Dark Zephyr anytime soon. The Skidrock drive was already sufficient for her needs. In fact, she only activated it once for a brief moment of time, when she needed to reposition from the spirit of Bentheim to the Gorgonaean in order to provide cover for the Amaranto. The only downside of the new Skidrock drive was that mounting it on the back of the Shield of Samur prevented the Amaranto from merging its frame with the expert Space Knight. This was not a serious loss. The Amaranto was still able to fire its instrument of vengeance while huddling behind the Shield of Samur. The two expert mechs just weren't able to share certain resources with each other. After that, Janzi returned to her original duty of guarding the flagship of the Larkinson clan against concentrated enemy attacks. Though she would have liked to keep Venerable Stark company for a longer period of time, her Shield of Samur would just get battered after enduring one attack after another from powerful enemy expert mechs, such as the Star of Liberation. Massive armored capital ships like the Graveyard and the Gorgonaean were designed to absorb as much firepower as possible. It was much easier and cheaper to replace their damaged hull plating than to fix up a powerful masterwork expert mech such as the Shield of Samur. Janzi waited for the moment where her defenses would truly be put to the test. As the Battle of Pima Prime entered its middle stages, a lot of Larkinson expert mechs began to get embroiled in their respective bouts against the enemy counterparts. The Sundered Phalanx all fielded their own collection of powerful and modern expert mech. Many of them possessed transphasic weapons and armor systems, which allowed them to give most Larkinson expert mechs a run for their money. Still, it looks like this battle is largely proceeding as expected, Janzi concluded. The flagrant vandals, along with Venerable Tusa Billingsley Larkinson, managed to overrun the right flank a lot faster than anyone expected. The fall of the famous Dukes and Hawks duo, along with the retreat of other expert mechs stationed on this side of the battlefield, spelled the inevitable defeat of the Nidden Vergers and other nearby light units. However, not everything was proceeding smoothly for the attacking forces. The units stationed at the left flank were encountering a lot more resistance. The reason for that was that the Sundered Phalanx stationed considerably stronger expert mechs at that side. The Larkinson army soon came under much greater pressure due to several reasons. First, the Tensars began to target Commander Kaesela Ingvar. This made the battle in the center a lot more complicated as the Arma Tensar and the Fila Tensar put heavy pressure on the only command-oriented expert mech of the Larkinson clan. Kaesela had little choice but to stop commandeering ordinary Larkinson mech units so that she could channel much of her energies to her brother instead. Venerable Janzi would have preferred to reinforce the Ingvar siblings and help the Minerva brave the threat from the highly mobile and highly dangerous pair of enemy expert riflemen Mechs. Yet before she could do so, the main fleet suddenly faced a huge threat. A single hostile high-tier expert Mech broke through the faltering left flank and approached the main fleet at high speed. The speed and power of this expert space knight, along with fire support from the rear, helped the threatening machine overcome every challenger in its way. Though it wasn't an ace Mech, its combat strength was so formidable that no other Mech unit or expert Mech could halt its advance. For a moment, the Eye of Ilvain, along with other friendly ranged Mech units, attempted to intercept this powerful threat. But the offensive Space Knight either evaded the incoming attacks or easily resisted them with its resonance shield or its physical round shield. General Verl quickly opened a communication channel with the shield of Samur. Venerable Janzi, the Scorpion Commando is swinging in our direction. It is highly likely that Venerable Oscar Verathan is aiming to distract us and force us to recall some of our troops to save our fleet. Do not let him get his way and stop him from threatening our fleet. Do not let it get close enough to threaten our flagship. Roger that, General. I am on my way. I can only stall it for a time, though. I will need additional help in order to restrain it further and tear it down. We will do our best to have Venerable Isabel Coton back you up, but there is great demand for her firepower. We are in the process of recalling a part of the battle criers. They are on their way to give you aid. Do not leave me with the Scorpion Commando for too long. A high-tier expert Mech is too strong of an opponent. Janzi could already sense the threat from a distance. The Scorpion Commando was one of the most threatening enemy machines alongside the Star of Liberation and the Shock Shell. The performance of the latter, too, gave her a much greater understanding of the threat posed by the Sundered Phalanx's high-tier expert Mechs. The Mechs themselves were constructed fairly well, and their veteran expert pilots were absolutely at home on the battlefield. Let's go, Sammy. I will not tolerate the intrusion of any enemy Space Knight, the Shield of Samur voiced. The living expert Mech already possessed a greater desire to defeat the Scorpion Commando than its expert pilot. While Janzi just wanted to stall the Scorpion Commando in order to buy time for others to take it down, the Shield of Samur wanted to do more. It wanted to defeat the enemy high-tier expert Mech by itself. Venerable Janzi thought that this was an incredibly absurd idea, but she didn't voice her skepticism, even though the Shield of Samur clearly knew what she was thinking with the help of the man-machine connection. Even so, that did not stop the two from working together and resonating with each other in order to meet the incoming threat on the best possible footing. If this was the old days, it would have taken both Mechs a long time to meet each other. In fact, an expert medium offensive Space Knight such as the Scorpion Commando would have easily been able to run circles around the Shield of Samur. If Venerable Oscar Verathan didn't want to tussle against the Larkinson clan's famous expert heavy Space Knight, then he could have easily bypassed the Shield of Samur. The current Mech generation changed many rules. Not every heavy Space Knight was as slow and lumbering as before. The 6th revision of the Shield of Samur focused greatly on improving the mobility of the Shield of Samur in order to make it more practical in many battle scenarios. Right now, Venerable Janzi made excellent use of the latest changes by employing her expert Mech's skidrock drive to rapidly accelerate away from the middle of the main fleet. She needed to stop the Scorpion Commando from getting any closer. Strangely enough, despite the fact that the Scorpion Commando actually possessed a clear advantage in mobility, even with warp travel taken into account, the enemy expert Mech made no attempts to circle around the Shield of Samur. The enemy Space Knight headed directly towards the Larkinson Space Knight as soon as it had a clear line of sight of Janzi's battle partner. The hostility radiating from the Scorpion Commando was palpable now. Venerable Oscar clearly had it out for the Shield of Samur. The nobility radiating from your fat and stupid machine is disgusting. Venerable Oscar sneered as he broadcasted his voice on an open channel. I detest naive little knights like you. Let me teach you a lesson and correct your misguided views. Don't call my Sammy fat. The two expert mechs did not make much effort to slow down their speeds as they entered into a collision course against each other. Soon enough, both expert space knights crushed their resonance shields against each other with great force, triggering an energy eruption that temporarily engulfed the surrounding space with extraordinary energies. Surprisingly enough, both mechs managed to surface the collision without suffering much damage. This was not that big of a surprise, as the Shield of Samur was an expert mech that was designed according to the concept of extreme defense. The Scorpion Commando, on the other hand, was a genuine high-tier expert mech controlled by an expert pilot that matched its strength. The only actual result of this collision was that the two opposing machines had largely depleted each other's resonance shield, making it easy for them to inflict real damage against each other. You shall advance no further. I shall tear off your face. As far as expert mech battles went, the fight between the Shield of Samur and the Scorpion Commando was not that exciting. The only notable fact was that the Scorpion Commando had advanced closer to the invading fleet than other mechs. However, despite the fact that it had put itself into an extremely vulnerable position by extending so far away from friendly lines, Venerable Oscar Verithan did not take the threats around him seriously. The reasons why he possessed such confidence was because of his unflinching confidence in his strength and the strength of his expert mech. The Scorpion Commando was arguably the most powerful melee expert mech on the battlefield. In contrast to the Star of Liberation that reigned over longer distances, or the Shock Shell that possessed a broad array of armaments that made it viable at multiple ranges, the Scorpion Commando was designed to function as a pure independent close-ranged assault machine. It possessed an impressive degree of mobility for a space knight, but still retained much of the high defensive characteristics of defensive mechs. What was even more unreasonable was that the Scorpion Commando also possessed plenty of offensive power in the form of its thick and heavy sword, along with its characteristic scorpion tail. Venerable Janzi deeply understood that an expert pilot that demanded to pilot a mech with such an aggressive configuration had no intention to protect other friendlies or cooperate with other comrades. Just as its name suggested, the Scorpion Commando was meant to function like a venomous predator that could single-handedly approach an enemy position and cause a lot of disruption. Many nearby ranged mechs, including the Transcendent Punisher's Mark Roman II, fielded by the Eye of Ilvain, found themselves unable to threaten the Scorpion Commando. It's too tough and too fast. More ordinary ranged mechs, such as the Rifle Warriors, were completely unable to track the dizzyingly fast movements of the Scorpion Commando. Though the enemy machine was classified as a space knight, much of its mobility characteristics matched a light skirmisher. Even if the mechs managed to get lucky enough to get in a solid strike, the powerful defenses of the Scorpion Commando effectively rendered the attack useless. The Transcendent Punisher Mark Roman II attained better results, but it cost a lot for them to constantly try to foresee the Scorpion Commando's incredibly agile movements. General Verl eventually called the ranged mechs off. Your firepower is needed to suppress the Blackened Reapers and the Witch Shatterers, as well as provide fire support to our most hard-hit melee mech units. Leave the Scorpion Commando be. The Shield of Samur is already locking it down, and more appropriate help is already on the way. The Scorpion Commando posed a considerable headache for General Verl, who knew what this enemy expert mech might do if it was able to approach a key capital ship, such as the Spirit of Bentheim. It would have been better to eliminate it right away, but the amount of assets needed to do so was so disproportionately high that other friendly units would lack the support they needed. Therefore, a strange situation took place, where the Scorpion Commando no longer attracted as much firepower as before. The pressure on Venerable Janzi increased a lot as a consequence because her expert Mech needed to prevent the Scorpion Commando from getting any closer to the main fleet. The Shield of Samur also had to endure the powerful attacks of the enemy powerhouse as best as possible. 2 different resonance shields flared as the Mechs exchanged powerful blows with each other. The powerful blue glow around the Shield of Samur flared each time the Scorpion Commando hacked at its target with its heavy sword. The weapon seemed to have been designed to attack heavy targets, as its unusually high density allowed it to hit as hard as an axe. This was not a weapon designed for finesse. The unending alloy sword in the hands of the Shield of Samur was almost just as heavy and possessed unnatural sharpness courtesy of caddies. However, both Mech struck against each other with the flat of their blades, because this was a better way to wear down the resonance shields of their opponents. It took a long time for the 2 Mechs to exhaust each other's initial defenses. The Scorpion Commando was backed up by the willpower of a powerful high-tier expert pilot, while the Shield of Samur was so large that it was able to provide plenty of support for its resonance shield. The only strange part about this mutual exchange was that the Scorpion Commando had yet to employ its infamous scorpion tail, but Janzi knew it was only a matter of time before it would strike. As the Scorpion Commando kept bashing its sword against the Shield of Samur, Venerable Oscar Verithan continually built up his rage against his opponent. "You are so weak, but your expert Mech is too damn tough. Only a coward would fight inside a tortoise shell." The Shield of Samur's flared with anger as the living Mech took offensive to the Friedayman expert pilot's words. Janzi felt the need to shoot back. "Your attitude and your words betray your lack of honor. A true hero and defender would never forsake his allies and fly solo. You know nothing, you little kid." Venerable Oscar became so stimulated by Janzi's words that his expert Mech exploded with power. The sickly green glow surrounding the Scorpion Commando grew brighter. The expert Mech charged forward and used its round shield to collide against the Shield of Samur. Not only that, the Scorpion Commando increased the speed and power of its sword strikes, causing the Larkinson expert Mech's resonance shield to weaken at a rapid rate. "Is this the best you've got? Your attacks are only tickling my expert Mech," Janzi taunted as she deliberately sought to attract her opponent's hatred. "Your decision to challenge a defensive Mech like mine is foolish. Your Space Knight doesn't have the power to threaten my battle partner." To be honest, Venerable Oscar was genuinely surprised at how much damage the Shield of Samur was able to resist. He could clearly feel that Venerable Janzi was still a fairly young and weak expert pilot. Her resonance strength may be fairly good among other Larkinson expert pilots, but she was completely unable to match his own power. It was the expert Mech itself that posed a huge amount of hindrance. As a heavy Mech, many of its technical performance parameters were much higher than usual. The higher amounts of resonating exotics responsible for generating a resonance shield meant that it was much harder to exhaust this defensive layer than with lighter expert Mechs. On top of that, the Shield of Samur was also one of the most powerful living Mechs of the Larkinson clan. It was old and had grown so much alongside Venerable Janzi that it was finally starting to display the true potential of living Mechs. For example, one of the ways the Shield of Samur helped was to make it easier for Janzi to resonate with it. Though the two weren't able to achieve unity of man and machine under the current circumstances, they had come a lot closer to it than any other pairing on the battlefield. The Shield of Samur, in cooperation with Venerable Janzi, moved a bit faster, dealt a bit more damage with its sword strikes, and most importantly enhanced its defenses to a greater degree than normal. Normally, the power of the true resonance generated between an expert Mech and an expert pilot was largely dependent on the latter's willpower alone, but this time it was different. The formidable spiritual foundation of the Shield of Samur acted as an amplifier of Janzi's resonance, allowing her to enhance her Mech's performance by 20, 30, or even 40%, depending on the exact function. Much of the synergy generated by the two went on to enhance the defensive parameters of the Shield of Samur. That wasn't all. Unlike Venerable Orphan and Venerable Desi, who tried not to rely too much on Kalankso, Venerable Janzi had no qualms about working together with the big lizard. As Janzi slowly deepened her cooperation with Kalankso, the design spirit became more and more able to channel her power through the Shield of Samur. Not only did Kalankso help to weaken the resonance-empowered sword and shield strikes of the Scorpion Commando, but she also began to project a thin spatial barrier that substantially bled away a considerable amount of incoming damage. The Shield of Samur fully showcased its ability as one of the most exemplary living mechs of the Larkinson clan. Its triple classifications as an expert mech, a masterwork mech, and a prime mech resulted in so much strengthening that it was able to endure much longer against a high-tier expert mech than usual. Venerable Oscar's obsessive hatred against his opponent cooled a bit when he saw that his Scorpion Commando still remained stuck at the same stage for over a minute. This was a confounding result to him. The Shield of Samur was lasting a lot longer than it should, and much of it had to do with the other living entities he was able to sense inside the mech. I've met and fought against my fair share of living mechs, but yours is definitely the most disgusting of all. Do you think you can fend me off with additional help? Then think again. Oscar became so tired of the stacking defensive boosts of the Shield of Samur that he no longer cared about withholding his trump card. The Scorpion Commando did not come with too many bells and whistles in order to ensure that all of its basic parameters were as high as possible. The only real gimmick it possessed was its scorpion tail. After Oscar resonated with this long and segmented limb, it shot forward with so much power and speed that it looked as if it had turned into a powerful beam of light as it struck against its target. No defense is impervious to my stinger. The Larkinson expert, Mech's resonance shield, and other barriers immediately became so destabilized that they were unable to recover as quickly as before. That wasn't the extent of the attack. It turned out that when the scorpion tail struck its target, the special stinger had discharged a special corrosive fluid that disrupted the functioning of the resonance shield. Venerable Janzi tried to get rid of the corrosive fluid, but it had spread out too quickly. Soon enough, the Shield of Samur became exposed as its formidable resonance shield finally popped. The real game begins now. The Shield of Samur already stalled Venerable Oscar for quite some time. This was an unforgivably long delay as far as the Fridayman expert pilot was concerned. The Scorpion Commando began to hack at the Shield of Samur with even greater vigor than before, but the expert Heavy Space Knight could rely on its thick and incredibly sturdy tower shield to block most of the incoming attacks. The excellent toughness of unending alloy made most incoming sword attacks ineffective. No matter how much Oscar empowered his blows with his powerful true resonance, his sword wasn't able to dig as deeply into the Larkinson expert Mech's tower shield as he wished. If you think a simple shield can stop me, then think again. I love tearing down shields like yours. The scorpion tail struck again, this time punching its sharp stinger as deep into the tower shield as possible. The stinger released a different formula of corrosive fluid this time. Empowered by Venerable Oscar's formidable willpower, the substance turned into unending alloy's nemesis and rapidly ate away a huge chunk of the tower shield. A noticeably large and expanding gap had formed in the Shield of Samur's defensive equipment. Vess, who had only mildly been paying attention to fight so far, reacted with utter shock and dismay at this outcome. No, how can so much unending alloy melt away? Unending alloy was an irreplaceable material to the Larkinson clan. If chunks of it ever got lost, Vess had no way to get any replacements. Verl, don't let the Shield of Samur sustain more damage. Hurry up and help Venerable Janzi repel the Scorpion Commando. We need to get rid of this scourge as soon as possible. If the Scorpion Commando kept attacking the Shield of Samur with its lethal scorpion tail, Tons of unending alloy would corrode away by the end of the fight. This Scorpion Commando is a nemesis against defensive mechs. The shield of Samur spoke to its battle partner. My armor cannot resist its venom. Venerable Janzi and her expert mech underestimated the potency of their opponent's stinger attack. Master Karai's Denton was not called the Viper for nothing. Her research and applications of corroding substances had reached such a high level that it appeared that not even unending alloy could resist its powerful effect. When empowered by Venerable Oscar's true resonance, this corrosive fluid was not only able to resist the attempts of Janzi, the shield of Samur and Kalenxo's attempts to weaken it, but also allowed the venom to break down the metals it came in touch with even faster. Venerable Janzi was horrified at how none of her defensive solutions were able to resist this insidious attack. Her distraction caused her shield of Samur to show a gap, which allowed her opponent to claim the initiative. The Scorpion Commando became a lot more violent as it struck at the melted and damaged portions of the tower shield with its heavy sword, intent on breaking apart this physical barrier as fast as possible. A space knight without a physical shield was much less capable of performing its defensive duties than normal. The shield of Samur would definitely be much less capable of withstanding the Scorpion Commando's attacks if that happened. The renewed threat assessment of the Scorpion Commando prompted the Larkinson clan to finally bring over additional support. It did not take long for a series of purple light beams to strike the Scorpion Commando's resonance shield. Initially, Venerable Oscar did not pay too much attention to the attacks. His strong willpower easily snuffed out the purple flames that threatened to deal additional damage, similar to his expert mech's venom. However, much of that changed when the distant expert rifleman mech began to adopt a different sort of attack. The light beams that struck the Scorpion Commando next caused powerful energy explosions upon impact. Though these strikes did not leave any lingering flames behind, the immediate release of explosive potential were draining the Scorpion Commando's powerful resonance shield at a rapid rate, despite the relative weakness of the attacking expert mech. Larkinson mechs bring out one surprise after another. The Fridayman expert pilot remarked with notable irritation. The new light beams drained his expert mech's resonance shield a lot faster than usual, which meant that Oscar had to take the new attacks a lot more seriously. The Promethea kept putting the Scorpion Commando under a lot of pressure with its abnormally effective energy attacks. I've been tasked with backing you up, Janzi. Venerable Isabel Coton spoke. As you can see, my Promethea has enough firepower to pose a threat to the Scorpion Commando. As long as you can hold it back, I can keep firing with impunity. Venerable Janzi finally smiled. Thank you, Isabel, but maintain your distance as best as possible. I am not sure I can keep the Scorpion Commando pinned. The two were highly familiar with each other. They practiced alongside each other many times in the MSDS, which meant that they both knew exactly what they needed to do in order to complete their objectives. The shield of Samur no longer shouldered the main responsibility of wearing down the Scorpion Commando's defenses. It instead began to adopt a much more defensive posture. It had to last as long as possible, while also ensuring that its opponent did not gain an opportunity to slip away. The Promethea, on the other hand, was responsible for grinding down the Scorpion Commando and disabling important parts and systems once they became exposed. With the help of the knowledge and techniques imparted by the Alphery Core detonation, code FRUIT, Venerable Isabel was able to channel the firepower of her Promethea in a way that the Scorpion Commando couldn't resist as well. No matter how much Venerable Oscar tried to weaken the incoming attacks with his willpower, the frequent and instant explosions happened so quickly that he wasn't able to mitigate the damage. Soon enough, the Scorpion Commando's resonance shield broke. Venerable Isabel smirked and slowed down her Promethea's firing rate in order to allow her mech rifle to charge up its attacks. The positron beams struck the transphasic armor of the Scorpion Commando and exploded upon impact, causing the enemy expert Space Knight to pay more attention to exposing its more critical parts. When Oscar saw that the explosive energy beam attacks were actually capable of damaging the powerful and resilient transphasic armor plating of his expert Mech, he regarded the Promethea as an acute threat. This was highly unusual as a mid-tier expert Mech, piloted by a rather new low-tier expert pilot, shouldn't be able to inflict so much damage to a high-tier expert Mech like the Scorpion Commando. The Larkinson clan constantly broke the rules concerning Mechs. The firepower of Venerable Isabel's expert Mech was so threatening that the Scorpion Commando didn't even dare to expose its back to the incoming shots. This considerably limited the Scorpion Commando's range of movement and offensive power. After enduring one powerful attack after another, Venerable Oscar couldn't take it any longer. He finally shifted his target away from the damaged but still vigorous shield of Sammer. "Since you are so eager to rely on backup to take me down, let me tear down your friend first." By this time, the tower shield that Janzi relied upon to defend against the onslaught of her opponent already exhibited multiple large and messy holes in the center area. Though the attack frequency of the Scorpion tail wasn't high, it was able to punch through and corrode a lot of solid materials within seconds. Already the shield of Sammer's burden had lightened considerably because so much unending alloy had just melted away. When the Scorpion Commando attempted to bypass the shield of Sammer and soar straight towards the Promethea in the distance, Venerable Janzi was not about to let her opponent leave. "Stay." The shield of Sammer tried its best to stay in the way of the Scorpion Commando, but this was a rather futile endeavor, considering that the latter was considerably faster and more mobile. As a lighter and more compact Space Knight, the Scorpion Commando possessed a considerable advantage in acceleration. It was able to speed itself up a lot faster. Though the shield of Sammer was a lot more sluggish and ponderous in space, Venerable Janzi and her expert Mech still had a way to keep their opponent in place. Janzi resonated with her expert Mech in a different way. Her mind and will touched on the GT 535 integrated in the powerful machine. Master Moira Willix of the MTA personally developed this resonating alloy in the past. It was considerably more powerful than most other resonating materials employed by other Larkinson expert Mechs. What was even better was that both Janzi and Kalanxo just happened to be compatible with this powerful resonating alloy. The shield of Sammer instantly seemed to gain a lot of mass all of a sudden. It was as if the defensive Mech turned itself into a black hole that sucked in everything in its reach. A powerful gravitic force acted upon the retreating Scorpion Commando. Fatal Attraction. The resonating ability activated by the shield of Sammer solely acted upon the Scorpion Commando by leashing it with a powerful gravitational pull. The effectiveness of the Fatal Attraction resonating ability was highly dependent on range. The closer the enemy Mech, the harder it was for the targeted machine to escape the artificial gravity well. "Annoying woman," Oscar cursed as he tried his best to break this extraordinary application of resonance with his willpower. "Nothing shall bind me in place." His aversion to getting trapped was so great that his willpower partially resisted the powerful resonating ability acting upon his expert Mech. The Scorpion Commando could not be held in place, despite the rather limited distance between the two machines. Of course, the shield of Sammer did not stay still all this time. It quickly repositioned itself so that it continued to block the Scorpion Commando's way. A minute went by as the Scorpion Commando continued its attempt to break free. Naturally, it also struck the shield of Sammer plenty of times since it was so effective at preventing Oscar from doing what he wanted. The Scorpion Commando, in the meantime, began to accrue a steady amount of damage. Though the shield of Sammer was unable to inflict significant damage the high-tier expert Mech, the Promethea was making steady progress in wearing down its target's thick shell. The Scorpion Commando's round shield began to exhibit more and more holes and craters, as explosive beams kept striking its surface. It was clear that the Promethea needed to launch a lot of attacks in order to truly defeat the expert offensive Space Knight, but at least Venerable Isabel was making progress. At some point, Venerable Oscar Verithan became so frustrated by the constant gravity pull generated by his first opponent that his force of will exploded with anger. "I shall not be bound." A powerful green explosion erupted from the frame of the Scorpion Commando. The eruption temporarily broke the gravity pull acting upon the expert Space Knight, allowing it to shoot away and build up enough distance to approach the Promethea. "Run, Isabel. I can't hold the Scorpion Commando anymore." Venerable Janzi became a lot more desperate as she saw that this powerful threat had gotten loose. Though her shield of Samur had managed to withstand the Scorpion Commando's attacks for an admirable period of time, this was because the living Mech excelled at defense. The Promethea was entirely different. As long as the Scorpion tail managed to sting the Promethea a single time, it was doubtful whether Venerable Isabel's expert Mech would be able to remain combat effective. Venerable Janzi urged her battle partner to activate the Skidrock drive and catch up to the Scorpion Commando as best as possible, but the speed disparity between the two machines was too great. When every expert Mech involved in this bout possessed warp travel capabilities, the factors that determined their relative superiority in mobility largely relied upon other factors. The shield of Samur was the slowest because it was so big and massive. The Scorpion Commando was the fastest because it possessed a balanced, high-end configuration and because a high-tier expert pilot amplified its performance. The Promethea was almost just as fast as its opponent due to its lighter and slimmer frame, but its other advantages weren't as great. Seeing that the Scorpion Commando was steadily gaining on the Promethea, Venerable Janzi knew they had to change their approach. "Isabel, swing around and take shelter behind my expert Mech," Janzi urged over the communication channel. "It will be much harder for the Scorpion Commando to target you if I'm close." "Are you sure about that, Janzi? The Scorpion Commando is too dangerous at close range." "I can't cover for you if you are too far away." "You have a point." Venerable Isabel Khotin changed the flight course of the Promethea and clearly attempted to circle around in an attempt to meet up with the shield of Samur. The Scorpion Commando tried its best to prevent its two opponents from uniting with each other, but it didn't work. Venerable Oscar paused for a moment before he scoffed. "HMPH, so what if the two of you met up with each other? I can still destroy you both." The Scorpion Commando charged forward and slammed its physical shield against the damaged tower shield of Janzi's expert Mech. At the same time, the Scorpion tail struck yet again. The tower shield was already in a pretty bad shape, but the two powerful strikes finally caused the center of the object to break. Two large and heavy pieces of thick, unending alloy floated off into space as the shield of Samur just lost its main defensive tool. Venerable Oscar grinned at the sight. "There is nothing you can do to stop me from destroying your friend. The more you stand in my way, the more I will make you suffer. No Night Mech is allowed to succeed in my presence." "What is your problem, Oscar?" A dance between three expert Mechs quickly commenced. The Promethea used the shield of Samur as a pillar and constantly rotated around the expert Space Knight as it continually struck the Scorpion Commando with exploding energy beam attacks. The shield of Samur tried to lock down the Scorpion Commando, or at least slow its attempts to circle around to strike at the Promethea directly. But Venerable Janzi found it incredibly difficult to keep the enemy high-tier expert Mech under control. Venerable Oscar Verithan was just too strong. Though he was not as advanced as Venerable Rebecca Andis, he still possessed the capital of a high-tier expert pilot. As he became more accustomed to the shield of Samur's ability to pull his Scorpion Commando closer with the power of gravity, he became more proficient with countering this effect. It became harder and harder for Janzi to keep the Scorpion Commando contained. "He's too strong. I can't slow him down that much anymore." Janzi and the Shield of Sammer's attempts to slow down the Scorpion Commando was as difficult as a human trying to stop a rampaging bull. When the difference in power between two entities were too great, the efforts of the weaker party only had minimal effect. This was unfortunately the case for Venerable Janzi, as her resonant strength and willpower development simply couldn't keep up against her current opponent. The Scorpion Commando wasn't interested in destroying the Shield of Sammer at all. Even if Janzi's expert Mech had just lost its tower shield, it still featured a lot of bulk on its frame that would take multiple attacks to overcome. Even if the Scorpion Commando managed to get through the remaining defenses of the Shield of Sammer, the Promethea would have inflicted a lot of damage by this time. Venerable Isabel Coton's new explosive attack method were already dealing substantial amounts of damage to the Scorpion Commando's round shield. The shield was not as thick and resilient as Janzi's unending alloy tower shield. Sooner or later, the Promethea would be able to chew through it and attack the more important parts of the Scorpion Commando. Venerable Oscar Verithan only became angrier and more determined to take out Venerable Isabel Coton than ever as a result. "I used to be like you once, Janzi," he spoke as his expert space knight attempted to bypass the Shield of Sammer and strike the Promethea with his scorpion tail. "I used to be a brave and honest night Mech pilot who put my life before the lives of others." "What changed? What caused you to build up so much resentment?" Janzi asked as she did not let up in her attempts to block and stall her opponent. "My comrades left me behind. That was what happened to me," Venerable Oscar exploded. "When the Hex army was on the verge of overrunning our Mech units, a group of friends and I volunteered to act as the rear guard and buy time for the rest of our troops to reorganize and launch a counterattack. Let me guess, that counterattack never came, right? My own commander left us for dead. That bastard lied to me. He told me he would come back and help me defeat the advancing Hexer troops, but what he actually did was order a hasty retreat, relying on me and the rest of the rearguard to give him an opportunity to save his own cowardly skin." "I'm sorry to hear that, Oscar, but a knight must help regardless of how he or she is treated. Your actions must have saved the lives of many Friday Men Mech pilots who would have otherwise perished, thereby causing your state to suffer a lot more losses than otherwise." Though Venerable Janzi wasn't entirely certain whether she would be willing to delay the enemy under those circumstances, her principles would have compelled her to stall the pursuing enemies if her services were necessary. "That is pure nonsense," Oscar furiously responded to Janzi's remark. "I am an expert pilot. My value is greater than thousands of regular Mech pilots. Not even Mech officers are as indispensable as me. Those cowards who discarded me like a pawn should have been the ones to stall the closing Hexer Mechs instead. It is their job to serve as cannon fodder so that strong demigods like myself can stay alive and contribute much more to my state." Venerable Janzi almost couldn't believe what she heard. What Oscar had just said went against everything a night pilot stood for. The extreme selfishness and lack of care that her opponent directed towards his lessers was appalling. "You are everything a night pilot must avoid. Don't bother with trying to shame me," Oscar contemptuously said. "Knightly virtues are horribly outdated. All of those rules and customs that the night pilot community attempts to saddle onto us are nothing but cynical attempts to brainwash us into cannon fodder. In the eyes of other people, the only purpose of Mech with shields and high defenses is to act as mobile punching bags. That's a lie. It's the truth, you naive woman. Just ask your own leaders, if you dare. None of them respect you as a warrior that deserved to be treated with as much dignity as other expert pilots. They merely see you as a defensive asset that they can use up as they wish. Take this battle, for example. Aside from sending you a single expert rifleman Mech, all of the other Larkinson Mechs around here are completely ignoring what is happening to you. They would rather fire their guns elsewhere than to." Venerable Janzi briefly paused for a moment as she couldn't help but harbor a bit of doubt. This tiny interval briefly caused the shield of Samur to slacken for an instant. Venerable Oscar keenly recognized this weakness and instantly burst out his willpower. Break! His Scorpion Commando unleashed another true resonance blast that broke the gravity pull on it once again. This allowed the Freidaemon expert Mech to finally bypass the shield of Samur and approach the Promethea. Isabel, I'm not that helpless at close range. As the Scorpion Commando came awfully close, the Promethea suddenly lifted up its 2 arms and activated its wrist-mounted flamethrower modules. 2 incredibly hot streams of purple flames completely engulfed the space in front of it with overwhelming heat. Venerable Oscar was caught off guard as his Scorpion Commando entered headlong into the expanding flames. The propellant formula utilized by the Promethea was extremely expensive and fairly difficult to buy on the market. However, it was especially formulated to fight against expert mechs. Though the Scorpion Commando was way too tough for the flames to burn it down in a short amount of time, the hot flames temporarily blinded its sensors, causing it to lose sight of the Promethea. By the time the Scorpion Commando escaped the flame cloud, its target had already taken shelter behind the shield of Samur again. The Scorpion Commando suffered light burn damage across its frame, mostly because Isabel's willpower was incomparable to that of Oscar. Nice trick, lady, but it won't work again, Oscar stated as his Scorpion Commando resumed its offensive as if nothing had happened. The 2 Larkinson expert mechs continued to struggle in their attempts to hold back the powerful enemy machine. The Scorpion Commando eventually lost its shield after it endured too many attacks from the Promethea. This allowed Venerable Isabel to target the exposed frame of the Scorpion Commando. Unfortunately for her, Venerable Oscar always made sure that his expert Space Knight never exposed its back. The frontal armor of the Scorpion Commando was still strong. The powerful high-tier expert mech didn't seem to have weakened in the slightest after losing its physical shield. Instead, the absence of this sizable object seemed to have liberated it a bit. It became a bit faster and more agile. If not for its relatively sturdy frame, it could have been mistaken for an expert swordsman mech. Though Venerable Oscar hadn't been able to fulfill his wish of striking down the Promethea, he was still able to inflict a steady amount of damage onto the shield of Samur. The latter's unending alloy armor system withstood the edge of the transphasic heavy sword fairly well, mostly by virtue of its thickness and excellent material hardness. Unfortunately for Janzi, the famed strength of unending alloy appeared to be completely helpless whenever the scorpion tail struck with great force. Each time this strange limb struck the shield of Samur, its stinger pierced through the upper layer and punched deep enough to inject a sizable amount of corrosive fluids. Empowered by Venerable Oscar's formidable will, the Scorpion Commando's venom rapidly ate away just as much unending alloy as before. It was as if the Viper specially formulated a substance that was solely designed to destroy the unending alloy that the Larkinson clan famously employed. While a certain mech designer was wailing at the sight of so much unending alloy being melted away, the Scorpion Commando finally managed to get past the lumbering expert Space Knight and gain a chance to strike at the Promethea once again. Though Venerable Isabel's expert mech let loose with its pair of flamethrowers once again, Venerable Oscar already anticipated this move. The Scorpion Commando did not advance straight towards the Promethea, but took a detour and circled around once again, allowing it to escape most of the flames. Isabel. The Scorpion Commando struck the Promethea's resonance shield with both its sword and its scorpion tail. This time, the latter sprayed a formula that was especially designed to destabilize and drain resonance shields. Though the Promethea's ability to resist incoming damage was not as bad as the old Amaranto, it was still rather deficient in this aspect due to emphasizing offense. The Scorpion Commando not only let its corrosive venom do its work, but also bashed the Promethea's resonance shield with repeated powerful sword strikes. Get away from my friend. The shield of Samur eventually caught up and physically pushed the Scorpion Commando away. Ha ha, you can't stop me, little knight. You're only delaying the inevitable. Though it took a bit of time, the Scorpion Commando soon managed to escape the entanglement of the shield of Samur once again. After ignoring and fending off the flames unleashed by the Promethea, the Scorpion Commando launched another flurry of attacks that finally broke the former's resonance shield. Venerable Oscar had been waiting for this moment. Now that the Promethea had no other protection left aside from its thin and inadequate transphasic armor system, the dreaded scorpion tail arced forward with incredible speed and power. The Promethea lifted up its powerful Ignitrone Luminar crystal rifle in an attempt to use it as a makeshift shield, but the segmented scorpion tail easily twitched and bypassed this pathetic obstacle. The modern knight is dead, Venerable Oscar viciously stated. Knights never fight alone, Venerable Janzi roared. The shield of Samur glowed with resonance a short instant before the scorpion tail could strike at the Promethea. Janzi not only connected deeper with her expert Mech than ever before, but also established a closer connection with Kalanxo. The shadow of a giant reptilian exobest appeared above the shield of Samur. Primal Aegis. The masterwork expert Mech began to embody Kalanxo to a greater degree, allowing the design spirit to extend a more distant spatial barrier that covered the Promethea just in time. The scorpion tail struck the spatial barrier with such great force that it quickly collapsed. This defensive measure was not strong enough to stop the strongest attack from a high-tier expert Mech. Due to this brief blockade, the scorpion tail had lost a lot of power and speed. Even so, the delay was so minimal that it still went on to strike the Promethea, though its stinger failed to punch as deeply into the transphasic armor plating of its target than intended. A dangerous amount of corrosive fluids splashed across the surface of the expert rifleman Mech. The machine could do little to nothing to stop the substance from spreading and corroding the armor. The fact that it was transphasic only mildly slowed down the progress of this attack. Though the weakened strike failed to cripple the Promethea in a single blow as Oscar intended, the attack still managed to eat through the Larkinson expert Mech's exterior and damage a part of its internals. The Promethea's performance quickly dropped. My Mech is hit. Unlike the shield of Samur, the Promethea did not possess the ability to resist sustained enemy attacks, especially once it expended its resonance shield. Though its transphasic armor system gave it a moderate advantage against opponents that did not possess any transphasic capabilities themselves. It was unfortunate that the Gage dynasty happened to be one of the parties that invested a lot into them, since its agents first stepped foot into the Red Ocean. The research and development they allocated to Facewater and its many applications far exceeded that of the Larkinson clan or any other private organization. As the Gage dynasty was as large as a medium-sized state by itself, it had no lack of senior scientists and capable research institutions. The Gauger Mech designers were the most enthused about Facewater technology out of almost anyone else. The masters among them eagerly experimented with all of the new possibilities that Facewater opened up. Their superior transhuman capabilities also allowed them to learn and master the uses of this complex substance a lot faster than other researchers. Combined with the fact that the Gage dynasty managed to lay claim to numerous colonies that possessed Facewater deposits of varying sizes, the Sundered Phalanx managed to modernize all of its expert Mech with remarkable speed. The Scorpion Commando was stronger than anyone expected. The main reason for that had to do with the scorpion tail and the venom it was able to inject into its victims. According to the intelligence leaks that the Larkinsons based their battle plans upon, the Scorpion Commando was able to deal heavy damage to exposed expert Mechs, but none of the planners ever imagined that its venom could turn the Promethea into a burden with just a surface attack. If the Shield of Samur hadn't activated its Primal Aegis ability with the help of its design spirit, the stinger would have been able to pierce into the Promethea's armor and inject much of that venom into the expert rifleman, Mech's crucial internals, thereby disabling it outright. "This shouldn't be possible," Vess exclaimed. "The Promethea's transphasic armor system is not a piece of cabbage. Its resistance against corrosion-based attacks should have been much greater." The Fridayman expert Mechs that the Viper designed in the past did feature highly effective corrosive fluid formulas that had managed to dissolve the armor of many powerful Hexer expert Mechs. But these incidents took place in a time where face-water technology had not spread to the galactic rim of the old galaxy. It did not take long until the Larkinson researchers found out why the Scorpion Commando possessed such abnormally high effectiveness against modern expert Mechs. The new corrosive fluid formulas employed by the Scorpion Commando are laced with face water. "What?" Vess looked surprised when he heard this report. "Even if that is the case, they still shouldn't have been able to eat through both unending alloy plating and transphasic armor plating so quickly." "That is normally the case, but according to an intelligent report from a handful of our black cats on the ground, a department of the Sundered Phalanx transferred over 1 kilogram's worth of face water to the space station, where the Scorpion Commando was stationed. We believe that the Gaugers augmented the Scorpion Commando's stock of venom with as much face water they are able to carry in a short amount of time." Damn it. This was a brilliant move from the enemy. A huge trading hub like Pima Prime most certainly accumulated a lot of kilograms of face water. The Gage dynasty probably prioritized the evacuation of most of it because of their value and because of the difficulty of converting them into anything useful. Though it would have been great if the locals were able to fabricate stronger and more extravagant transphasic parts for their expert Mechs, the invading forces arrived too quickly for the Sundered Phalanx to upgrade all of their expert Mechs. However, it was still possible for the high-end laboratories on Pima Prime V to produce enhanced corrosive fluids in a hurry, especially if the Viper had already developed the higher-end formulas in advance. Vess already gained a fairly deep cognition of how the introduction of face water would change battles between human Mech forces forever. The Scorpion Commando was nominally an expert space knight, which was supposed to be the least threatening Mech type among this category of high-end machines. Yet by sticking the Scorpion tail on its back and reserving enough room to contain a reservoir of face water-laced corrosive substances, the expert space knight became even more dangerous than the shock shell at close range. Combat between transphasic Mechs is largely a competition between who is willing to squander more money. The side with the biggest wallet will often gain the upper hand. This was the most painful part about Mech combat in the Facewater era. The Larkinson clan and the rest of the Golden Skull Alliance managed to luck out because they managed to plunder huge amounts of Facewater during the Purgatory campaign. If Vess hadn't pushed to go on a small mission to a star system that just happened to contain a hidden phase whale enclave, the Larkinson clan would have never been able to invest in so many powerful transphasic expert Mechs. This would have put the level of its expert Mechs at the same height as that of other medium-sized private organizations. In an alternate reality, where the Golden Skull Alliance never commenced the Purgatory campaign, its Mech forces would have never been able to compete against state-backed military forces such as the Sundered Phalanx. The disparity in resources would have been too great. When Vess figured this out, he felt vindicated for pushing his clan and its allies to not hole up in Davut all of the time. Sure, the Larkinson clan would have definitely been able to develop at a steady trajectory by relying on the growing commercial success of the living Mech Corporation. But how could the Larkinsons ever catch up to the likes of the Fridaymen and other larger players that had access to a lot more population, territory, resources, and funding? If Vess did not want his clan to remain vulnerable to the predation of these larger players, he needed to accelerate the growth of his own Mech legions. Perhaps the performance of the Larkinson army was quite good during this battle, But that was only because the Hex army locked down the bulk of the sundered phalanx Mech divisions. As groups like the Gage dynasty began to adopt face-water technology on a wider scale, an even greater separation would take place between the bigger players and the smaller players. Ordinary mercenary outfits and security companies did not have enough access to face-water. A lot of face-water harvested from places like the Friday colonies were internally consumed, which meant that they rarely got sold on the open market. The market price for face-water became ridiculously high for this reason, as only an overwhelming premium would convince parties to sell a portion of their reserves to their rivals and competitors, opponents. As long as the Shield of Samur was able to retain full power and functionality, it possessed the capital to slow down the Scorpion Commando, especially now that Venerable Janzi had fully woken up and exceeded her previous limitations. The stakes of the battle, along with the need to protect Venerable Isabel and her weakened Promethea, drove Venerable Janzi's willpower to new heights. Alongside that, the Shield of Samur and Kalenxo both deepened their cooperation with their long-standing partner, allowing the trio to develop a more extensive degree of cooperation. The most drastic benefits of their greater synergies was that the Shield of Samur's true resonance had become stronger and more condensed. Janzi's stronger willpower amplified every performance parameter of her expert Mech to a greater degree, allowing the Shield of Samur to move faster and exert a stronger gravitic attraction force on the Scorpion Commando. "Let go, you stupid woman." Despite Venerable Oscar's best attempts to break the fatal attraction resonating ability that was preventing the Scorpion Commando from chasing after the Promethea, his breakout trick no longer worked as effectively as before. Part of that was because his previous outburst had tired out his strong, but still finite willpower. Another part of it was because Janzi and Kalenxo had amplified the power of fatal attraction. This was not sustainable, though, as the amount of exertion required to restrict the movement of a high-tier expert Mech was too great for Venerable Janzi. "I can't hold the Scorpion Commando for long," she gritted her teeth. "We need to take it down quickly." Venerable Isabel quickly made an estimate but shook her head. "My firepower isn't high enough. The Scorpion Commando's armor is just too strong." Just as the two Larkinson expert pilots were trying to come up with desperate measures, over 100 slicer beams struck the Scorpion Commando and the area around the enemy expert Mech. "Who dares?" Venerable Oscar shouted, as the narrow energy beams managed to bite deeper into the armor of his expert Mech than they should. It's the battle criers." Venerable Isabel's expression lifted up. "Our reinforcements have arrived." The battle criers was one of the least notable Mech legions of the Larkinson clan. Much like the avatars of myth, the battle criers got outshone by the much more impressive sword maidens and penitent sisters in the battles that the Larkinson clan fought in the past. It didn't help that the battle criers were smaller in scale and notoriously insular. Their background, martial traditions, and subculture deviated so much from the rest of the clan that few Larkinsons took them seriously. This was despite the fact that the battle criers were also responsible for organizing the honor guards of important clan figures, such as the clan patriarch and his immediate family. Naturally, Vess did not wish to see the battle criers suffer in neglect. He had spent a considerable amount of time during the Larkinson clan's stay in Davut to help with reorganizing battle criers and finding a new role for them that allowed them to stand out within the Larkinson army. The decision that Vess had made was to orient the battle criers towards countering extraordinary threats. None of the other Mech legions were especially geared towards fighting against dark gods, expert Mechs, and other extraordinary threats. The only solutions that the Larkinson army could deploy against these kinds of powerful opponents were its modest amount of expert Mechs. Though the Larkinsons invested heavily in the development of their expert Mechs, it was impossible for Vess to put all of his eggs in a single basket. What if they ended up in a situation where they ran out of expert Mechs? What if the strength of an enemy spiritual entity was too strong? If Vess had the option to expand the amount of options for his troops to respond to these kinds of overwhelming threats, then he would be stupid to ignore it in favor of investing all of his hopes on his expert mechs. As such, Vess supplied the battle criers with an experimental mech model that possessed a couple unique features that made them particularly suited to fight against expert mechs. The nullifier mechs have come. Though Venerable Janzi and Venerable Isabel weren't certain whether the reinforcements dispatched by the battle criers could pose a sufficient threat towards the Scorpion Commando, their firepower at least spread the burden and help with constraining this powerful machine even further. As the distant battle crier mechs continued to fire at the Scorpion Commando with repeated attacks, it became more and more clear that their attacks weren't like the ones fired by other mech units. For example, the attacks launched by the rifle warriors missed their mark most of the time, as their mech pilots simply weren't able to track and predict the Scorpion Commando's fast and erratic movements. The Transcendent Punisher Mark Roman II, fielded by the Eye of Ilvain, were able to attain a considerably higher hit rate, but Scorpion Commando easily resisted the cannon fire by relying on its transphasic armor system. As an expert space knight, the Scorpion Commando's defensive systems were among the best of all of the Sundered Phalanx expert mechs on the battlefield. Though Venerable Oscar was no longer able to put up a resonance shield for the time being, he was still able to reinforce his expert mech's armor system with true resonance, thereby drastically weakening every mundane attack that did not have the support of extraordinary willpower. In short, these defensive enhancements practically made the Scorpion Commando immune to regular firepower. Venerable Oscar wouldn't have dared to travel so deeply behind enemy lines if he did not have the confidence to evade or withstand so many attacks. The best way for the ranged mechs of the Larkinson army to pose a serious threat to such a powerful high-tier expert mech was to employ transphasic weapons. The Larkinson clan was not comfortable with expending its finite reserves of face water to augment its ordinary mech units. The avatars of Myth and the Eye of Ilvain didn't get their wish of being able to field ranged mechs armed with transphasic weapons. Therefore, General Verl had already decided long ago that there was little point in wasting the firepower of his ranged mech units on an expert mech like the Scorpion Commando. Perhaps this might make Venerable Janzi and Venerable Isabel feel abandoned by the Larkinson army, but Verl believed that the two Larkinson expert pilots should be smart enough to understand the reasons behind his decisions. That did not mean that General Verl neglected their plight completely. It just took a bit more time than expected to reposition the special mech units that he had tasked with reinforcing the Shield of Samur and the Promethea. The mech officer in charge of the newly arrived mech unit opened a communication channel to the two Larkinson expert mechs. Venerable Janzi, Venerable Isabel, I apologize for our delay. We helped with taking down several enemy expert mechs and attracted a lot more retaliation from the Sundered Phalanx than we expected. We were forced to split up half of our mechs to keep our attackers at bay. That is not important, Major Dietrich, Venerable Janzi immediately said as she took charge of the situation. I need you and your fellow battle criers to reposition your nullifier mechs so that you can cover for the Promethea. Do not allow the Scorpion Commando to approach Venerable Isabel's expert mech. Its condition is so bad that it cannot endure another attack. Understood. We will attempt to discourage the Scorpion Commando from taking action against the Promethea as best as possible, the battle crier officer replied. They no longer needed to exchange any words, as they all knew what they needed to do. While the two expert mechs were adjusting to the fact that they had backup, the special ranged mechs fielded by the battle criers began to spread out across a wide fan that was opposite to the Promethea. When the ranged mechs brought their heavy luminar crystal rifles to bear on the Scorpion Commando, their piercing slicer beams began to dig into the more vulnerable rear armor, flight system, and most importantly the Scorpion tail with remarkable efficiency. Though an armored expert Mech like the Scorpion Commando was still able to endure the incoming attacks with no immediate alarm, Venerable Oscar was not comfortable with exposing the most vulnerable side of his machine to sustained enemy attacks, especially when they were both accurate and more capable of damaging his expert Mech's transphasic armor than normal. A quick analysis caused the Friedman expert pilot's heart to quake. Painting Mech design was simple. If gods do exist out there, then they can be killed. As long as we kill enough gods, then none of them will exist anymore, allowing humble humans like myself to inherit the cosmos. I just need to come up with enough firepower to overwhelm their defenses. With that in mind, Vess invested a lot of time and ingenuity in completing his long-stalled Fearless project. One of the key aspects that made his nullifier Mech so threatening were their godkiller rifles. They were larger, heavier, and incorporated much more expensive materials than normal. Vess had to invest a lot of effort into adding strong spirituality-based security methods in order to meet the demands of the MTA and prevent these potent armaments from falling into the wrong hands. Vess' original intention for the Godkiller rifle was to make it powerful enough to allow his nullifier Mechs to take down enemy expert Mechs by themselves. In order to ensure that his battle criers could truly pose a threat against enemy expert Mechs, Vess had made the remarkable decision to integrate 5 grams of face water in each Godkiller rifle. This was not a large amount of face water compared to the weapons utilized by typical transphasic expert Mechs, but the modest addition was enough to weaken the transphasic effect of the Scorpion Commando by up to 50%. In other words, the Godkiller rifles already possessed the capital to wear down the Scorpion Commando's defenses, especially if they concentrated their output on the weaker rear of the Friedman expert Mech. The uncannily effective slicer beam salvos caused Venerable Oscar to become so uncomfortable that he consciously tried to turn the rear of his expert Mech away from the battle crier Mechs as much as possible. Unfortunately for him, orienting his expert Mech in these ways prevented it from pursuing the Promethea as effectively as before. Oscar's hopes of quickly finishing off the Promethea became dashed. "You annoying ants, what is your identity?" Venerable Oscar demanded on the open channel. "You are not a regular Mech unit. You have the honor of attracting the attention of the Nullifier Battalion." Major Dietrich responded in a neutral and utterly fearless tone. "Your reign of terror will come to an end at our hands." "Hey, with just 100 Mechs. Our Mechs have already contributed to the downfall of 3 of your sundered phalanxes' precious expert Mechs. Those were low-tier expert Mechs, am right. Whether your Scorpion Commando is a low-tier or high-tier expert Mech does not matter to us. As long as we can make it bleed, we can take it down. Even ants like us can defeat an elephant like you. Look at how much damage your expert Mech has already sustained." The Nullifier Battalion did indeed help with defeating a number of enemy expert Mechs, but that was when they cooperated with other friendly expert Mechs. Major Dietrich did not think that the Nullifier Mechs under his command were capable of defeating the Scorpion Commando by themselves. The enemy expert Mech could easily close in on the battle crier Mechs and cut them down one by one regardless of how much they tried to distance themselves from each other. However, the Shield of Samur and the Promethea were already doing a decent job at constraining the Scorpion Commando. It was impossible for this dangerous enemy machine to attack the battle crier Mechs without exposing its rear to the ignitron rifle of the Promethea. As such, the Scorpion Commando's situation continued to deteriorate as it became sandwiched between 2 powerful ranged threats. On one side, the Promethea did its best to pelt the Scorpion Commando with exploding energy beams. Each strike not only chipped away a small but significant chunk of armor, but also made it vulnerable against follow-up attacks launched by the battle crier Mechs. On the other side, the dispersed Mechs of the Nullifier Battalion completely ignored the intimidation factor of the Scorpion Commando and fearlessly tracked its movements while targeting its more crucial sections as much as possible. Even if the effective hit rate of a single nullifier Mech did not exceed 30%, that still amounted to a dozen hits per salvo due to the numbers brought by the battle criers. Though Venerable Oscar increasingly wished to smash apart the two potent ranged threats, the Shield of Samur doggedly tried to keep the Scorpion Commando in place. "I won't allow you to leave," Venerable Janzi exclaimed as her mind became more and more strained as she continually tried to lock her opponent down with the help of gravitic power. The steady downpour of incoming shots were slowly stripping away at the Scorpion Commando's formidable transphasic armor system. Its front received the bulk of the damage, but its rear wasn't looking all that great either, especially when a multitude of slicer beams had landed on its crucial flight system. It became increasingly clear that the Scorpion Commando couldn't endure this situation much longer. Let alone taking down the Promethea and the Mechs of the Nullifier Battalion, Venerable Oscar wasn't even sure if he would be able to return to friendly space. After the Scorpion Commando became sandwiched by both the Promethea and half of the Nullifier Battalion, the expert Space Knight came under increasing suppression. Though it was able to rely on its strong transphasic armor system to buy a lot of time for itself, the problem was that both the Promethea and the Nullifier Mechs possessed enough firepower grind the Scorpion Commando over time. More crucial components such as the flight system, the various booster modules, and the Scorpion tail no longer looked as pristine as before as numerous hits damaged their exteriors and threatened to disable them entirely. A powerful attack from the Promethea managed to damage a part of the Scorpion Commando's flight system, thereby directly reducing its mobility to a small extent. As the Scorpion Commando came under greater pressure, Venerable Oscar Verithin became more vicious than before. His expert Mech's attacks struck harder as Oscar did not hesitate to take greater risks. The Shield of Samur that consistently prevented the Scorpion Commando from running away got struck by many sword strikes and numerous painful Scorpion tail attacks. The latter especially posed a great threat to the living Mech. The Shield of Samur experienced great pain that fed back to Venerable Janzi, causing her to grow angrier to the suffering that her opponent inflicted. "My frontal armor is full of holes," the Shield of Samur groaned. "I cannot endure these attacks much longer. Too much of my internals are exposed." "Do you want to retreat?" Venerable Janzi asked. The Shield of Samur conveyed a clear sense of rejection. "No, we are the only ones that can stop the Scorpion Commando from rampaging through our rear lines. It is not just the Promethea and the Nullifier Battalion that are in danger." The living expert Mech was right. The Golden Skull Alliance could hardly field any other expert Mech that could restrain the Scorpion Commando. Venerable Janzi and the Shield of Samur therefore tried to endure the onslaught as much possible, hoping to spread out the incoming venom attacks as much possible. After experiencing the Scorpion Commando's signature attack numerous times, Janzi had become a lot more proficient at anticipating and mitigating its damage. While her Shield of Samur wasn't fast enough to evade the deadly Scorpion tail attack entirely, it was enough to deflect or redirect this powerful limb to the more intact sections of the living Mech. In addition, Janzi's close relationship with Kalenxo allowed the latter to project momentary spatial barriers that offered modest but crucial protection to the exposed internals. "Keep holding on, Sammy. The Scorpion Commando is already starting to decline." Janzi managed to preserve the performance of her expert Mech for a longer time by employing various techniques, but she could not keep doing this without a price. The most immediate consequence was that the Shield of Samur's irreplaceable unending alloy armor was steadily melting away. Although the loss of all of this bulky alloy reduced the mass of the Shield of Samur and made it easier for it to keep up with the Scorpion Commando, the biggest downside aside from losing a lot of protection was that it was losing a lot of spiritual capacity. Unending alloy played a crucial role in enhancing how much spiritual energy from its designed spirit it was able to contain. Each ton of unending alloy that dissolved from its frame turned it into a weaker prime Mech. After so much of the shield of Sammer's exterior got worn away, the help that Kalanxo was able to provide became a lot more limited. Venerable Oscar immediately recognized these changes and began to wait for the right moment. As soon as the shield of Sammer attempted to defend itself against another scorpion tail attack, the stinger suddenly expanded and released a wider spread of corrosive fluids than before. The cone of venom spread out into space and splattered across the entire surface of the shield of Sammer. Many shallow holes began to form in the armor that was still intact, but what was even worse was that numerous exposed internal systems received damage as well. Even if the damage to these parts were relatively limited due to their inherent resilience and the high degree of compartmentalization of the shield of Sammer, the expert space knight unavoidably stalled for an instant. Venerable Oscar completely exploded with the energy that he had left. "Ha, no defense is impregnable against my expert Mech. Now that I've put you in your place, let me take care of your comrades and show you that your knightly duty is an exercise in futility." Though the shield of Sammer was more vulnerable than ever, Venerable Oscar still understood that it would take quite a bit of time and effort to defeat the hardy Mech completely. The Promethea and the Nullifier Battalion would never stand by and allow the Scorpion Commando to finish the job. Considering that the ranged Mechs posed the greatest threat against the Scorpion Commando at this time, Venerable Oscar urgently wanted to get rid of them first. He had already set his sights on the damaged Promethea. Not only was it a lot more vulnerable than before, but destroying it would immediately relieve a lot of pressure. Of course, Venerable Isabel did not allow her Promethea to become a sitting duck. She drove her expert Mech to the rear of the Larkinson clan in an attempt to delay interception, while luring the Scorpion Commando further away from enemy lines. Since the mobility of both the Promethea and the Scorpion Commando became impaired, it would have taken a long time for the latter to catch up to its target. Venerable Oscar already arranged a solution to this problem. Kaja, the star of liberation that had been dueling the Amaranto for a while, now was no longer in a good condition. However, Venerable Kaja Rizkin still managed to squeeze out a quick snapshot at the distant Promethea before she went back to restraining her main opponent. The overlapping resonance-empowered laser and positron beam that quickly roared across the battlefield was not the strongest possible attack of the Star of Liberation. Its power just happened to be enough to precisely strike the exposed rear of the Promethea. Though Venerable Isabel's intuition detected the threat in advance, she was still too weak, and her expert Mech was no longer in a fit enough state to evade the attack entirely. Two powerful energy blasts erupted from the rear of the Promethea in quick succession. While the firepower outputted by the ranged high-tier expert rifleman Mech did not succeed in destroying the Promethea outright, the latter's flight system was no longer operational as more than half of its components were destroyed. "What is your status, Isabel?" Janzi urgently asked. "My Promethea has lost the ability to move," the strained expert pilot reported. "Aside from a few boosters, my expert Mech can't move anymore. My machine is drifting space, and I can't do anything else aside from turning my Mech around so that I can minimize its silhouette." "Damn, the Scorpion Commando is rapidly gaining on your Promethea, and my shield of Sammer can't catch up. I highly advise you to eject." "But I can't." "Please repeat that, Isabel." "I can't eject," the ranged specialist spoke. "The strike to my rear is worse than I thought. Too much of the ejection mechanism has malfunctioned to the point where the backup systems aren't even working anymore. I'm stuck." "What?" The news rocked Venerable Janzi's mind. With the way that Venerable Oscar was racing towards the crippled Promethea with his damaged Scorpion Commando, Venerable Isabel would most certainly lose her life in a short moment. This was something that venerable Janzi could never accept. "We need to go faster," Janzi urged her battle partner. Though the shield of Samur was still able to rely on its skidrock drive to shakily engage warp travel and catch up to the Scorpion Commando, the enemy expert Mech already gained too much of a head start. Venerable Janzi rapidly processed the movement data and concluded that it was impossible for her shield of Samur to catch up before the Scorpion Commando could land a fatal blow on the helpless Promethea. Her mind will become more active than ever as she rapidly tried to figure out ways to prevent her fellow expert pilot from dying. Raids at the cost of putting herself at risk. Would she choose to do her duty and abide by the tenets of a knight? She instantly made up her mind. "I am not venerable Oscar. I am a protector. It will never abandon my duty." Her willpower surged with strength as she affirmed her conviction. "Then let go." She did. Pain instantly overtook her mind and body as a powerful presence forcibly wrenched away her control while also squeezing up her strength as if she was a battery. Though venerable Janzi instinctively wanted to resist against this painful intrusion, she consciously suppressed her instincts because she fully trusted her expert Mech to do what was necessary. The shield of Samur did not betray her trust. The powerful living Mech took over control in order to start a number of different processes. Its flight system exploded with a lot more power than before. It overloaded its skiprock drive, causing it to amplify the shield of Samur's speed even more at the cost of burning a lot of face water and damaging the combat drive's internals. It also activated the fatal attraction resonating ability to a much stronger degree than before. While the Scorpion Commando was too far away for the Larkinson expert Mech to catch up to, the shield of Samur actually applied a strong gravitational pull towards itself. It was as if Janzi's expert Mech was pushing itself behind its back. Even though this kind of move should never work, the shield of Samur's incredibly strong determination seemed to defy the laws of nature and succeeded in accelerating its frame forward a lot faster than normal. Though all of these emergency efforts put the shield of Samur under so much stress that it was already starting to malfunction, the larger and slower expert space Knight rapidly managed to close the distance to the Scorpion Commando. The shield of Samur didn't even have to do anything special. As long as it managed to collide against its target, the Scorpion Commando would definitely miss its opportunity to finish off the Promethea. As the distance between the two space knights rapidly closed, venerable Oscar grew incredibly angry at Janzi and her living Mech. "Fine, then. If you want to sacrifice yourself to save a weaker expert pilot, then so be it. You brought this on yourself." Venerable Janzi sensed an incredibly strong threat from their adversary, as the Scorpion Commando rapidly thrust out its scorpion tail towards the approaching shield of Samur. The scorpion tail began to glow with incredible power as its stinger actually expanded, revealing a wide nozzle that was already filled with a lot of venom. It turned out that venerable Oscar already realized that his deployment in the field had come to an end. Before he pulled his Scorpion Commando back to friendly territory, he wanted to empty all of the remaining corrosive fluids stored inside his expert Mech at once. This supervenom attack was so threatening that venerable Janzi gained the sense that she would undoubtedly die if her shield of Samur continued to advance. Nonetheless, venerable Janzi exhibited no fear at all during this desperate time. She continued to endure the pain and lend as much of her willpower to her expert Mech as possible to ensure that they would succeed in saving venerable Isabel and the Promethea. As long as the Scorpion Commando discharged all of its venom at once, it no longer posed a massive threat against other Larkinsons anymore. At this moment of life and death, venerable Janzi felt more in tune with her principles, her conviction and her knightly virtues than before. A small sublimation took place in her mind as her willpower continued to expand, thereby supplying her shield of Samur with greater power. However, just before her expert Mech reached the Scorpion Commando, Janzi's eyes abruptly widened as her connection to her battle partner started to snap. "No, we're in this together, Sammy. We promise to be partners for life." A powerful sense of fatalism overtook the expert Mech. Only one sacrifice is needed. The shield of Sammer forcibly activated the eject by itself, which rapidly caused its cockpit to launch from the rear of the doomed expert Mech. "Nuo, you can't do this, Sammy," Venerable Janzi hysterically called as her cockpit rapidly entered a trajectory that brought it towards the nearest friendly starship. "Live for me, Janzi." Though the shield of Sammer had lost its true resonance and prime resonance support, it still retained more than enough momentum to collide against the Scorpion Commando. The latter tried to prevent this as much as possible by prematurely spraying out its entire reserves of venom into space. A large volume of face-water-rich corrosive fluids, based on several different formulas, rapidly covered and engulfed the shield of Sammer. Even though the Scorpion Commando already used up more than half of its reserves, what it had left just a moment ago was more than enough to eat away at the remnants of the shield of Sammer unending alloy armor system and dissolve enormous chunks of its internals. The power reactor, the Mech engine, the heat sinks, the energy cells, and even the arms and legs fell apart or melted away. Though the dying Larkinson expert Mech still managed to collide against the Scorpion Commando and inflict serious damage to its flight system while it was melting, its fate was most definitely worse. By the time the Scorpion Commando's venom had run its course, the shield of Sammer was no longer whole. The Mech wasn't even recognizable anymore, as much of its frame had broken up into numerous streams of highly deformed metal slag. Only a few whole parts were left intact. Fingers, internal motors, a piece of the power reactor, and more were all that was left of one of the most iconic Mechs designed by Vess. The only remnant of the shield of Sammer that was still whole was its head. Aside from getting splattered by numerous drops of corrosive fluids, its iconic visage still remained intact, though it was completely devoid of power. "Sammy." Venerable Janzi felt completely defeated as she lifelessly sat inside her ejected cockpit. Even though her expert Mech had saved her life, Janzi never wanted to be brought to safety.